being 6 o'clock, I'd like to call the Senior Center Building Committee to order. Before I do a roll call, I'd like to read into it. Pursuant to Governor Baker's COVID-19 orders superseding certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Section 30, Section 18, imposing strict implications on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Senior Center Building Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Members of the public who would like to participate in the meeting via Zoom can do so by clicking on this link. Members of the public who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may also do so by telephone by dialing 1-646-558-8636 and enter the meeting ID 873-4112-0597. Then press the pound sign and press the pound sign again. In the next voice prompt, members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comment if they wish to do so during the portions of the meeting designated for public comment. By following the steps previously noted, they press the *9 on their telephone keypad, and using the hand raise function on Zoom, they will notify the meeting host that the caller wishes to speak. In the event that despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide for real-time access, we will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as we are able. All right, I'll take a roll call. So when I call your name, say present or here. Diane Allen.
Here.
Paul Moriarty.
Here.
Jack Holloway. Okay, I see Jack's there, but Teresa Manganelli.
Here.
Greg Bendel.
Here.
Terry Marciello.
Here.
Okay. Jack, can you hear us yet? Andrew, can you? All right.
It looks like he doesn't have any audio connected, just his video.
Okay. All right. Also with us is Jeff Hull, the town manager for Wilmington, and our host tonight is Andrew Fredette. All right. So on the agenda tonight, we have our two interviews as we did last night. The first one being Dietz and Company. We will use the same questions in the same format that we did yesterday. Everybody should have their questions in front of them. All right, Andrew, you can let them in.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, George.
My name is George Hooper. I'm the chairman of the Senior Center Building Committee. In front of you is also our members. I will have them introduce themselves as I call out. Diane.
Diane Allen, member of the Permanent Building Committee and also a member of the Master Facilities Plan.
Paul.
Paul Moriarty, member of the Master Planning Committee also and the Permanent Building Committee.
Teresa.
Hi, Teresa Manganelli, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee and a member of the Facilities Master Plan.
Greg.
Hi, good evening. I'm Greg Bendel, and I have the good fortune of being on the Wilmington Board of Selectmen.
Terry.
Hi, I'm Terry Marciello, Director of Elderly Services.
Also with us is Jack Holloway. Jack, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right. You want to introduce yourself?
So Jack Holloway, member of the Permanent Building Committee and the Master Plan Committee.
Also with us is Jeff Hull, the town manager. All right, so tonight we're going to ask you a series of questions. First, we'll let you do your presentation. We'll keep it to 20 minutes for your presentation. We have about 12 questions to ask.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you.
Start at any time.
All righty, we'll take it away. So
Carrie,
thank you.
Carrie, I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we get there.
All right, thank you. Hopefully we'll beat the clock, so we'll try. All righty. So thank you very much for inviting us. We're honored to be here. I also want to thank you for your time. I know being on volunteer committees for towns is quite the challenge, and I know you've put a lot of time in now, and you will in the future, I'm sure. So our agenda for tonight, and I'd like to share our screen. I'm assuming that I have permission to do that. Let's see. Yes, I do. And our agenda for tonight is to do some introductions, obviously. And we're assuming in the preparation of this that you've read through all of our material. You know us quite well. So we're going to try not to repeat ourselves. So let's start with the introductions. I'm Carrie Dietz. I'm the managing principal of Dietz & Company Architects. And my role here is to provide overall oversight for the project, to provide QA and QC, and also to be involved in the codes and the regulatory processes in this. Lee?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lee Morissette. I'm a principal architect at Dietz & Company Architects, and I'll be the principal in charge on this project, which means I'll be directing the project as a whole and overseeing the management and administration of the project throughout. And I bring to this project almost 20 years of experience in architecture and design, and the design of highly sustainable and cost-effective buildings for both public and private clients. In particular, my focus has been on publicly funded projects such as schools, affordable housing, and community centers. So it's a pleasure to be here. Marco?
Evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting us. It's both an honor and a privilege to be here. I'm the project architect manager and your point of contact for anything that's project related. I'm going to see this project through from start to finish, making sure it's a success. Mark?
And I'm Mark Aragoni. I'm a licensed landscape architect in the Commonwealth. I'm also the manager of landscape architecture at SLR Consulting, which is formerly Mylone and McBroom, and we will handle the site development, engineering, landscape architectural components of the project.
So at this point, what I'd like to do is kick off the presentation by taking you through our typical process. I'd like to show you how we go about the process of programming and budgeting, and then we'll talk about design and site test fit, and then even show you some examples of our recent work. So beginning with programming and budgeting, this is where the design really starts. Go ahead, Carrie. It really starts in the demographic research of the project. Along with demographic research, we have a lot of data to mine through to really understand for our own due diligence what the town of Wilmington is really all about and its needs. And we have the great good fortune of having a substantial and exhaustive study by Harriman Associates to pull on, and we're very grateful for that. And there are a bunch of really interesting things we pulled out of it. And one small example I just want to show here is that, as you know, Wilmington is going to see a pretty substantial increase, a disproportionate increase of folks over 60 in the next 30 years, which means this is a perfectly timed project and is very well needed. But that also, the number of folks turning 60 and over will help us begin to right size the project for the community. And you can see in bold here are Greenfield, Ludlow, Westfield, and Marlboro. Examples we'll show you a little bit more of in the future that we've recently completed. And this project is smack dab in the middle. This is just a very similar size and very similar town sizes as well. So we'll come back to this again. But the next slide. The next important thing, and I can't stress this enough, is the user group interviews. This is where we really get to see what is important, who the stakeholders are, who's involved in decision making, and how it impacts the shape and form of the project as a whole. This leads to all of the important decisions being made, whether the program elements, the uses of the building are well represented, that no one gets left behind, and that we really understand where the priorities lie. Because until we establish those, establishing the size of the building and the budget is very difficult. So once we have these user group interviews, we get to hear from the folks who'll be using, maintaining, and paying for the building, and we really begin to understand what the priorities are. Next. And then we overlay that with building use requirements. What is dictated by zoning for setbacks, for avoiding wetlands interference, these kinds of things? What do the authorities having jurisdiction have to say about the requirements for the building, and as well as massing and exposure to sunlight, daylight and views, and all the other things that the building dictates. So we add those requirements to the others, and we begin to get a picture of where this project might sit. And we've taken a guess here. And you can see we're coming up with a senior center size of about 17,500 square feet, which is a little bit bigger than Harriman had predicted. And if we applied a rather typical cost per square foot, because we feel that we do very cost efficient buildings, we're coming up with a number just north of 6 million. And all in costs, this ends up being a little higher than a Harriman expected. But more important than the actual number is that we're showing a range here. And this is an example of just wild guessing based on expertise. But what's really important is that we get more information about your priorities to right size the project for you and understand where the priorities lie for the budget. So the next step after that is needs versus wants. And this is just a little graphic example of a summary of spaces where we take the demographic research and our expertise interpreting that data along with group interviews and building requirements, and overlay a basic cost analysis to it. And we begin to understand what spaces are in and what spaces are out. What are real needs and essentials for the project and the stakeholders, and what are desires. And this leads to what, well, if I may say selfishly, is the fun part of the project, the architecture and the design. And for that, I'd like to kick it over to Marco.
All right, thanks, Lee. So once the previous 4 steps as described by Lee are completed, we can begin working on the building layout using desired adjacencies and plan diagramming. The image to the right shows the process in action with 2-scale color-coded program functions that are moved around until the desired layout is achieved. I think this is the easiest and quickest way to transition from the program to an actual building layout. A lot of times I'll just work with the executive director, in your case, the elderly services director or building committee on this process, picking up pieces, moving them around, trying different layouts until we get it just right. So this is the Marlboro Senior Center, Marlboro. This senior center is part of the town park. It's seen from 3 sides, so the building elevations were very important. We worked with the building, the elevation scales and materials to make sure that we fit in. As you can see, the left side of the building is a 2-story portion, and the upper floor is reserved for future expansion space. The right side has a vaulted double height ceiling for the multi-purpose space. It's important to have very nice spaces that people can appreciate. The next building we're going to look at real quick is the Westfield Senior Center. Neighborhood context was very important on this project. It's surrounded by a series of 2.5-story wood frame buildings. And again, we relied on scale. We used lap siding and wood trim to break down the building volume to respond to its neighbors. The senior center is located adjacent to an elderly housing project. So, understanding the importance, we connected it with a pedestrian pathway. Here's the Greenfield Senior Center. This building has a rustic craftsman style type appearance, reminiscent of many of the homes in the nearby residential neighborhood. It was important to the town that we fit in. The exterior envelope utilizes the latest energy efficient construction and high performance technology. The interior layout is compact and organized around a centrally located lobby and lounge spaces. And lastly, I'll talk briefly about the Ludlow Senior Center. It's adjacent to a historic industrial mill building complex. So as inspiration here, we use interior and exterior features that recall Ludlow's mill building heritage. The interior layout is arranged around an L-shaped corridor system, a feature that allowed us to have an 18,000 square foot building to be easily accessible by seniors. Each corridor had a midway oasis sitting area that would reduce the overall travel distance. So even though it's a large building footprint, it's easily navigated because the distances are broken down and allow places to sit and congregate and discuss. So now I'll pass this on to Mark as part of the site selection process.
Yeah, and just to note, Marco and I had a lot of fun on that Ludlow project working together, and I just love seeing the pictures of how it turned out. As the building programming is developed, we also have to pay close attention to the actual sites in which that building program is going to be applied over. What we've done in the past with site development projects is we funneled it down to about 6 criteria that we like to look at to get us familiar with the site and really look for any red flags. They base from location. We want to understand where the location of these parcels are when we're doing a feasibility study within the community, but also within each neighborhood, within each of those sites are. We look at site constraints, the topography. Do we have a steep sloping site where we have to really worry about universal accessibility? Is that gonna result in excess cost for earth excavation, regulatory permitting, the capability of utilities to service these sites? Access and parking. We know that parking is a significant part of these projects. We want to make sure we pay attention to that and where it's actually located and the ability for it to be located on the site. Flexibility and expansion. This is an important one. We can understand and plan for a goal of 2030 and a building size, but we always want to see if that site can afford any expansion. We also want to look and see if that site's big enough to house any other municipal facilities. Outdoor spaces have never been more critical than they have been in the COVID world that we're living in. That's something that we always pay attention to, but we're putting an emphasis on passive and active outdoor recreation space. And then owner specific criteria. That's something that the building committee may have specific requirements that we may need to look at. It could be the budget requirements. It could be an additional building that needs to be required or housed on that site in the future. So what we've done is we've looked at a few test fits for each of the projects.
So I have a couple of general site plan comments. Just so you know, all the site layout plans that we're showing you this evening will have the following components, even though we might not necessarily call them out each time. In every case, we have a building volume and a footprint with a vehicular drop-off area. We always show an outdoor program space and future building expansion space. And we always have an exterior. I'm sorry, there was something that was interrupting the connection here.
You're good, go ahead.
Okay, excuse me. And we always show an exterior utility area on all the layouts. Mark, do you want to start with just maybe a more in detail description of each site?
So again, we had some fun sitting around virtually going through these plans. We refer to site 1 as the town common site. As you can see, we think there's opportunity for a potential building to sit proud to the street, have a relationship to the 4th of July building, have adequate parking, and just really become part of that civic community downtown. Site 2, we've dubbed it the town hall site for obvious reasons. This site is different. It's not downtown. It's not that centralized civic site. However, there's a lot of opportunities that exist out here with potential to construct a larger parking lot that may share use for the recreational facilities off hours, or potentially additional building space in the future. This site separates service, a separate drop-off, and parking, all using one singular 2-story entrance, which could be a pretty significant architectural feature.
Mark, before you move on, I wanted to point out that parking could have dual purpose in that, it could also function for the baseball fields on Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm. Site 3 on Middlesex Avenue, we've referred to this internally as the commercial site. It's the narrowest of the sites, but it's also the closest to the T-stop. It's very close to Silver Lake, so it has different amenities than some of the other sites that we just discussed. This one affords the opportunity to maybe look at an elongated building that doesn't sit perpendicular to the street, but also takes a different take on it. Interesting on this site, we zoomed in, there is additional land to the back, but what we don't quite know is, are the 2 wetlands on either side connected via a water course? So those are regulatory things that we want to get our head into to really understand how much is the expansion space? How much could this be pushed to the rear of this parcel? And site 4, the Main Street site. By placing a building still visible from the street to the rear of the site, it affords us expansion space. If we were to place that building closer to the street with parking behind, it might constrict the ability for expansion. This also affords a nice southern exposure like the previous site, really considering that daylighting, and also has a nice symbiotic relationship with the church parcel to the adjacent side.
Thank you, Mark. These are really exciting to look at, and I know we've had a lot of fun developing them. But that brings us to the real question: is how to make a decision. And so let's continue this hypothetical exercise a little further. So in the next slide, we're through the design process, we're going to come up with a lot of options. That's just how design works. It's an iterative process. Here, as an example, you see 4 design options that Marco sketched up for Ludlow, the project you saw a little while ago. And these show the flexibility of our design ability, but also that we come up with a lot of design options very quickly. So how do we rate these? We don't want to overwhelm anyone. So next, what we do is we like to use an owner's decision matrix. This is a way of evaluating a number of different options with a set of agreed upon criteria. So we work with you to evaluate criteria that are most important, that are most salient for making the decision. And then we help you rate, sometimes as simply as 1 money sign or 4, or preferred high, medium, low kind of preferences that begin to generally, well, they usually tease out a front runner. And that's the real purpose, is to see which options are the ones we should continue developing. So at that point, we then move on to cost control. Well, honestly, cost control is always happening. It's a part of the design process. As soon as we establish that budget with you, we are doing our best to stick to it, come up with ideas that conform to it. And our process in-house of quality control and quality assurance means that we're keeping an eye on the building design and site design so that it meets both the quality that we promise and also that it meets your budget. And to check in on that budget, we use a process of cost estimating and reconciliation. If the OPM and if we should go with a construction manager at risk, for example, they can participate in this cost estimating process to get even a finer tuned estimate. And then we follow this cost control all the way through into bid alternates potentially when it comes time to bid the project to provide greater flexibility to you to really get the building that you desire. And so then the trick is communication. We need to bring the project to you at a regular basis so that you understand where things are, what decisions need to be made, and how the timing goes. And so we do this in a number of different ways. And boy, we've really had to learn some new techniques over the past year. It used to be we'd just all get in a room every couple of weeks and talk about the project. Now, the benefit of being digitally connected as we are now is we can have meetings like this. Anytime that we need to talk about something, we can share ideas, whether it's a green charrette, fancy word for sharing ideas about sustainable measures, or a universal design discussion where we show examples and discuss priorities, or really teasing out the priorities of service provider. This is all done now through user group surveys and virtual meetings and even real-time polling in a multi-user login such as this on Zoom. We tap into website and social media resources, whatever we can to get the message to you on the building and site development committees, and as well as the community at large. And we have to say we've really worked to become a software fluent company on both Zoom, as we are now, Submittal Exchange, which is a preferred technology by P3 that we're beautifully comfortable with, Bluebeam, and even Teams. We're engaging in new technology all the time, which brings us to our last slide, which is why us? Well, I think we've made a pretty good case that we are proven in the elderly services center design world. We have a number of handsome projects, if I do say so myself, that we've shown you that we're very, very proud of. We've brought these in on budget and on time on a regular basis, and we have been extremely responsive and dedicated to our clients. We are there for you, and we know we're going to stick around and do what needs to be done to get the job done right. And to that end, we do the job with custom design solutions that are contextually sensitive, as you saw. Carrie?
So for us, this is meaningful work. It reflects the values of this company. And senior centers in particular are wonderful examples of community buildings and the kind of work that we like to do to engage the community and to serve the community. That's what we do. So thank you again for your time. And hopefully, Dan, we beat the clock.
I think you did fine. All right, so you may have
Right
touched,
on target.
Woohoo.
you may have touched upon some of our questions, but we'll ask you to elaborate a little bit more. Starting us off will be Paul Moriarty. Question number 1.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for a great presentation. So my question to you is, did your firm meet design timelines for, say, your last 10 or so projects? And if not, what were the reasons for any delays that were incurred?
I would say that we've met all of our design timelines. I think that the COVID certainly has caused some disruptions in schedules, but both from the owner's side and from our side. I think, as Lee said, those first couple of weeks were, quite frankly, hell. But I actually think that we're more efficient now than we were before. So we're right on time. So my question back to you, I guess, would be, what is your timetable? And you can answer that or not. We can come to that later.
Yeah, that would go to our OPM.
You're already behind schedule.
Yeah.
That's what Dan always says.
We're working on schedules, but we're hoping to have programmatic design and schematic design done by the fall.
Okay, great.
Yes.
We were a little bit concerned when we saw that you had a town meeting coming up in May 1st. So
I'm good.
That's
Terry,
not
I'm
realistic.
Not that good.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Dan has held our feet to the fire on many, many occasions. So it wouldn't have surprised me.
All right, number 2 is Teresa Manganelli.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
My question concerns your last similar project. How did the original cost estimate compare to the final cost? And if there was a difference, would you please explain why?
Marco, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I don't have the specific data in front of me right now, so I'm not going to quote actual numbers. But Dan, you'll remember that we were charged with producing a large footprint senior center for a budget that was pretty strict, and we came in under budget, so much so that we ended out incorporating, the owner elected to do some additional work, like changing the type of water detention system. So I feel that working hand in hand, we were able to get that project in under budget and even still allow the owner to pick up these extra amenities that added value to the project.
Thank you.
Number 3, Jack.
Yes. What did your firm do to assure a quality product and workmanship?
Lee, why don't you take that one? Because I think you're kind of knee deep in that in Cambridge right now.
I certainly am. Our practice is regular check-ins of quality control and document review. A number of us senior architects will trade projects with each other at several points during the design phase to have a fresh set of eyes. That set of eyes turns into a marked up set that we share both internally and with our consultants to review that we've made sure that not only do the documents conform to best practices and to our standard of care that we owe to you, but also that we haven't forgotten anything, that someone might bring up some performance issues that, oh, have you heard of a new technology, or this might help you here, that kind of professional sharing and collaboration. And then it is also run through the project manager to make sure that all of the program elements are there and are present. This is something we're doing rigorously now with our BIM platform, Building Information Modeling. We use Revit, and we've firmly restated our Revit standards in the office so that our entire office now has a touchstone for how best to produce documents. And we're doing the same thing with document delivery so that we have a very easily accessed resource for consistency. And we feel that's extremely important for our product.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Were you referring to quality of our work or quality of the contractor's work? Because that's another topic.
Yes.
Quality of both.
Okay. So Lee, why don't you keep talking then?
Okay.
Again, because you're in the world of quality control right now.
Absolutely.
Also, can I add some, Lee? I don't want to interrupt, but also like longevity of products. What do you use, like flooring and designs and carpet squares, or something, especially where it's for a senior center?
Absolutely, that's a really good point. And my current project that I'm actually finishing up on right now, I've been spending the past 2 years going to Cambridge to work with the Cambridge Housing Authority on just such a construction project, a rehabilitation project of an old 1970s high-rise tower. And in that project, we were, to answer your question, George, we were really specific about our decisions for healthy products for the building that have a very long life, that are very durable, easy to clean, and have an end-of-life plan so that they can be recycled by the manufacturer, taken back, that are non-toxic, those kinds of things. When it comes to the quality control that you were asking about, Jack, it is a boots on the ground approach. I before COVID, I was at the site 2 days a week, every week, working with a contractor, and that was a CM at risk. It wasn't a design bid build. These folks know what they're doing, but it was a complicated project with a very fast schedule, and we did whatever we needed to do to get there, to see the product, to solve problems collaboratively, and that's continued. And I have to say, we set a precedent for good quality construction, and now they call me on the phone. We do FaceTime meetings in the middle of a boiler room to see if we can swing a pipe out of the way to miss something. And I'm going to take a look at it tomorrow when I go to the site.
I just want to also add a little bit quality. So design is kind of a multifaceted process, and when you push the pedal on one issue, something else pops up, right? So when you say, I want a product that'll last me 100 years, well, the cost of that goes up.
Yeah.
So part of our job is to give you options, to say, this is a 20-year product, this is a 50-year product, this is a 5-year product. Here's the implications going forward. So, we're going to be part of that conversation with you to help you make those choices.
Okay. Thank you.
Greg?
Thank you very much. And folks, thank you for your very nice presentation. Question I want to go back to, I think it was your second or third slide. I know we met the principals, and it sounds like the answer to my question might be Lee and Marco to some degree. But my question is, the architect is the head of the design team. Can you tell us about your key staff and consultants for the project? So I guess essentially I'm asking if you could elaborate on your second or third slide there you showed us.
Absolutely. I'm going to kick this one to Marco, because your familiarity with the project team is really what matters here.
Right. So, I'm the day-to-day person who always looks at this. I'll have a team of 1 or 2 architectural associates. I'll have a lead that I go to that has this project every day as well. I imagine our project team might be me and 1 or 2 other people in the beginning. It might drop down to me and somebody else, but I think that's that's a typical way that we'll staff projects. Lee, you and I will probably talk, if not every day, at least several times a week. If I run into something, I know that I can approach you or anyone else. We have a very strong QA QC system. And I think a dedicated young staff. We're always in the process of mentoring our architectural associates. So, there's a hierarchy, and yet at the same time, there's a blending. So, we try to do a little bit of both. I go to Lee, Lee might come to me. I have an associate that comes to me. I might go to somebody else. So it's a team approach that always emphasizes quality, timeliness, and value for the client.
So Greg, just also to expand a little bit on some of the consultants. So our job is to be the conductor of the orchestra. And so it's not just the folks that are sitting, you know, 2 desks away from each other. It's also the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer. It's the fire protection engineer. It's our structural engineer. And we've worked with all of these folks in the past. You know, we bring seasoned professionals to the job, and people that we've worked with on similar scale projects or senior centers. So they understand what the concerns are. And I think also, COVID has caused us to look at a number of issues far more carefully than we did in the past. Fresh air requirements, air circulation, air purification systems, light fixtures that serve as sanitizing devices and air purification devices in addition to lighting. So those are all things that it's, you know, as architects, we don't necessarily design all those systems, but we need to be on top of the design of those systems so that you're getting a complete package. So I hope that answers your question.
And they really, really like their civil and landscape architectural sub-consultant. I just want to throw that out there.
We wouldn't have you if we didn't.
Thank you.
Diane? You're muted,
You're
Diane.
muted, Diane.
Unmute me because I got a notice that the host muted me, but that's okay. That's all right. No cookies for you, Andrew. My question is one that is probably at the top of the list here. And I'm sure, as you know, Wilmington has another building project running at the same time as this one. Talk about our committee, you know, really having to have a lot of thought to this. And it's running at the same time, actually, as this one. So could you explain how you would coordinate with the other designer on that project and help us build a consensus as to the best site for each of these projects? You're talking about 2 entirely different buildings and needs, one more programmatic, one more, in my opinion, like an office building, but yet they both play a very important part in the community. So we are very fortunate in that we have parcels to look at, but location, location, location. So I'd like to get, you know, some feedback from you. And your landscape person, Mark, said he would be involved in the site selection and help the committee. But Carrie, if you want to elaborate on.
Well, I have a really simple answer. We arm wrestle. Okay, that's
I lose.
Sorry. Right. Well, you know, when we were looking at the Harriman report, and I saw this chart in here that said that you were going to do these projects at the same time. And P.S., we've also applied for that other project. And so the other simple answer is you hire us to do both, and then there's no coordination issues.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, right.
Which, you know, and it's interesting that you did pull these apart, and for obvious reasons. I think they are. I would love, you know, if we're the architect for one versus the other, is, you know, let's early on sit down with both sides and say, let's figure this out. Let's figure out a meeting system, because there are some overlapping issues here. And I think that there's some ways that you could save a little bit of money on some of your site analysis if we shared some of these resources. So for example, if we're going to do wetlands mapping, right, there's no sense doing it twice. You might as well do it once. If we're going to do borings, let's say we pick the town hall site just for, you know, whatever. If we all come to the conclusion that that's the best place for both buildings, then there's a lot of duplication that we could eliminate, that each design firm could say, let's accept this survey, let's accept these soil borings, let's accept this wetlands mapping, you know, all of those things could be shared. So I think there's a tremendous possibility for overlap here and coordination. So, and you know, we'd rely on you to help us do that coordination, right? Because it's not our job to manage your other consultant, but we'd certainly be open to any strategy. And, you know, again, the beauty of, you know, Teams and Zoom and all of these things is it's so much easier to do that now.
And I would like to add just a little bit as well to say that we as a firm love partnering with other design firms.
Yeah.
So we're used to working with other design firms. We're used to meeting in the middle, figuring out a strategy to work together, working behind the scenes as necessary to solve problems. I mean, we would love to do both projects, and we anticipate doing both projects, and we're going to try our best to win you over. But should we have to work with somebody else, it would be a pleasure. Every time we get to work with another architect, we always learn so much, and it's a real joy.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question with that, Carrie?
Terry.
Hi, it's Terry. Can you give an example of an overlap of anything that you've done in the past that you've just expressed? Of two, working in the same town with two buildings that were joined together, or you work together?
It's more in the, you know, we've done some school projects where we were the architect on one building and the other firm was the architect on the adjacent building. And so we did have to work some stuff out there. It's pretty rare what you're doing, but that's okay. I mean, we can roll with those punches.
Thank you.
I can speak specifically to an experience I had before I joined Dietz a few years ago. I worked for a firm in downtown Boston, and we were design partners with another firm, which happened to be in the same building. It was a partnership between Arrow Street and William Rahn Associates on the Cambridge public school, one of the elementary schools in Cambridge. And the way that we worked this out was that we would work on the academic half of the building, and William Rahn Associates worked on the public spaces half of the building. And they were connected with a couple of hallway connectors, but they really were two discrete buildings in lots of ways. And we proceeded through the early phases of feasibility and schematic collaboratively. And it was really fun. It was like working in a super studio because we had two really talented groups of architects working together and coming up with exciting solutions. And then once the mold was set, then we separated and said, okay, you stay over on your side of the building, we'll stay on our side of the building. And when things cross over, let's get together and solve problems together. But it was really rewarding because we set each other up for success in a way that we couldn't have individually on such a large site.
One last thing I just would like to follow through, and this was something that Carrie just mentioned. Yes, it would be very interesting should, I guess you are applying for the town hall. Would that mean we'd get some reduced or a better product? Because we would have both of you.
The volume discount.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I guess the other question that I would ask you.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
Qualification based. We can't ask questions.
We
about
can't.
Right, Dan. Come on, Dan.
I'm sorry.
We're getting off topic a little bit here too, so.
Well, but I think you raise an interesting question that I had when I was reviewing your material is, why not combine these buildings? And there may be a reason, you know, that the town has for having them be two distinct buildings, but maybe there's an opportunity, again, shared savings, to combine them. So just putting that out there.
Well, I think we did a lot in the master facility plan through that particular issue. So but thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Besides partnering, overlapping, and eliminating redundancy, what problems would you see having these multiple projects and looking for similar sites? I mean, so do you see anything that would be an issue that we would be looking for?
I'll chime in very quickly just regarding the sites, because I spent a fair amount of time on the 4 sites. I think that would, to put both buildings on the same site, not all sites are going to accommodate that. So depending on the location, depending on, you know, the size of the site, the size of the buildings, I don't, you know, I believe, you know, a couple of the sites may be able to accommodate it. The other selection might be determined by the type of site. Like the town common site is prime for either one of these buildings. I don't know that both are going to fit on it though. Lee or Carrie, I'm not sure if you guys were going to say something, but I just want to.
Is there anything in particular that concerns you? I mean, like you said, you both, you might not be have both projects, so you're volleying for the same site, and you know, is that a concern or?
I think, you know, I'll step in here. I think that part of our job is to elicit from you and the town what's most important to you. And each of these sites has meaning to you. And we don't know yet what that is. I mean, we can make guesses based on, you know, looking at maps and driving out there and looking at it, but you live in the town. You know what's important. You know which historic buildings are critical and need to be featured. You know all of those things. And so our job is to allow those criteria to bubble up and make one site sort of stand out more than another. And I can actually envision, as we've been talking about this, you know, getting the architect, you know, from the town hall and the architect from the senior center and you all together in one room. Let's knock on wood that we can make that happen, but in one space together where we just start talking about these so that they get to hear and we get to hear, what do you care about? What's important? What's not important? And what are deal killers? You know, like, you know, you've got these 4 sites, but like maybe, you know, somebody's proposed a site that you're all kind of like, we don't really want that one, but we'll pretend that we want it just to go through this process. So.
And I stayed quiet as long as I possibly could, but
Go for it, Mark.
I'll interject on this one. So we spent a lot of time looking at these sites. I know we glossed through them, and that was intentional, sort of to pique your interest, but we actually went through the sites and we did a red light, yellow light, green light on the evaluation criteria that I sort of walked you through. And we decided, nah, we're not going to show what we came up with, but I'll give you a little bit of a hint. They were very similar where they had some constraints that we needed to keep our eye on, but the deciding factor that we left no red, no green, no yellow light was that owner specific criteria. And that's just what Carrie talked about. That could be a deciding factor on whether or not these sites actually work. So it was interesting and I'm glad we held it back. And I hope you're all wondering, oh, what did they rate those sites? But we're not going to tell you.
You have to hire us to get that info.
Yeah.
Very good. Paul, you're next.
What is something about senior center designs that your firm handles differently from others that could potentially be advantageous to the town of Wilmington?
All right, I'll try to get this. One thing that I like to think that I do well is listen and understand what the owner wants. So I'll use Ludlow as an example. Ludlow just finished. I think it's a handsome building. And in the very beginning, when we started, we had this like 18,000 square foot building. How are you going to do that? So as you saw in those diagrams that we did, you know, I worked very closely with the senior center director on what she liked, what she didn't like, how she worked. You know, I practically shadowed her to understand what the spaces were. And I think that like that, going that extra mile.
Well, we lost.
Uh-oh, he just froze.
He froze, yeah.
Okay. Going that extra mile is really what made the difference at Ludlow. And I think, well, Dan Plata told us it was his favorite building so far, but
it is a beautiful building.
I won't quote the direct quote that he said because it's not for primetime TV. But I think what makes the difference for us is paying attention to detail. really looking at what's appropriate for finishes, what's appropriate for the look of the building on the outside. You know, senior centers also need to serve my generation, Lee's generation, Marco's generation, Mark's generation. It's not just about who we're serving right at this moment. And you know, we've boxed seniors into a corner in some ways. I'm just anecdotally, a friend of mine is having to place her husband in a memory care unit, and fortunately, they're in New York City, and so they have an opportunity to pick things that don't look like your grandmother's senior citizen's home, right? They're getting to pick what I would pick if I were going to live in New York City, you know, hip, cool spaces with amenities and things like that. So we need to be looking to the future. And that's what we're trying to do in everything that we do, is design for flexibility. We're not always going to be playing billiards. You know, we're not always going to be, you know, running bingo games. Things are changing, and they're changing very quickly for seniors. So I hope that answers your question, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks.
Sorry for dropping off.
She picked right on your word.
Yeah, I just, boom, I got it, Marco.
Great. Teresa, number 8.
Yes. Have you had to exercise your errors and omissions policy at any time in the last 10 years?
No.
Great.
In fact, the last 20 years, the last 30 years, no.
Thank you.
All right, number 9, Greg.
Thank you. What changes in building HVAC designs or other design elements do you believe will or be or should be made from what we've learned from the current pandemic?
Well, I would say the other thing that besides the pandemic is what's happening with the energy code in the state of Massachusetts. I don't know how much you're aware of the new climate bill that was just passed by the state Senate, but it's going to make sweeping changes to how we all look at energy. And I kick me for not knowing this. Is Wilmington a green community?
No.
They're not. Okay, interesting. Okay. So energy usage is going to become a critical issue. And, you know, what we're seeing out in the western part of the state is gas moratoriums. And so it's causing us to go to all electric buildings, or in some cases, propane, because we can get propane, but we can't get gas. So those are some of the things that are really causing some changes. And then I think, as I said before, the fresh air requirements and the systems by which one, you know, sanitizes, for lack of a better word, the air, are going to be critical. And the consultants that we use on this it's in their faces right now. You know, they're doing this on a regular basis, and we're seeing it in the housing work that we do. Things are changing and changing quickly, and compartmentalization is really critical. You know, being able to isolate a space and only have the air circulating in that space versus spreading it throughout the entire building has been critically important.
I'd like to jump on that briefly because the project that I'm working on in Cambridge is having to do retrofits like every other project currently under construction, where we're scrambling to address the current health crisis through bipolar ionization at the units themselves to address the air that's moving through, increasing filter densities so that we have higher particulates caught to maintain higher air quality within the building as a whole. But to Carrie's point, it's a strategic design decision that makes the difference. We've been designing buildings to very high standards for a long time here at Dietz, to compartmentalize, to reduce leakage, to maintain efficient systems. And all of these design imperatives lead to a better performing building that make these issues easier to address, because we're designing for more fresh air. We're designing to be efficient. And I think that's the big thing moving forward.
Good. Carrie, and to elaborate on that, we have an MLP municipality. Reading Light is our power plant. And
Okay.
we have built to LEED certification for our high school, and of course we go for sustainability and energy efficiency. So difference here in Wilmington.
Are you anticipating that you would design this building to meet LEED?
That'll be a discussion.
Okay.
So, can you answer what changes have you seen in the past 5 to 10 years as far as concerning the seniors and their needs, and how would you design and build for that?
So I think I answered that question before, when I was talking about, my generation is not the generation before me. What my father would have wanted in a senior center is not the same thing as what I want. And so I think we need to be looking at those demographic changes. I think seniors are more active physically, mentally. They're more connected than the previous generation was. So I think those are the kinds of trends we're looking for. And also to look at what are the services that you want to provide at the senior center. Every senior center is sort of slightly different. There's a common denominator, but there are services that some senior centers offer that others don't. And so I don't know if food insecurity is an issue in your town. It is in some of the other towns that we've worked in, Greenfield in particular. And Veterans Affairs, Veteran Services. I noticed that you have that as in a separate building, a separate location. We've seen those combined with senior centers. So that's something to think about, starting to also figure out a way to get more men involved. We see senior centers as being pretty dominated by women. Not that that's a bad thing, but how do you serve the other half of the population? And so what are some of the things that you can do to bring them in?
Yeah, just exterior too. I mean, I find it's hard. I've been doing this for 25 years, and these most recent projects, we can actually use the word active recreation when talking about a senior center. And those are words. It was always passive recreation, passive recreation. We got to hit home passive recreation. No more. This is multi-generational design. And even in the outdoor spaces, it's not just it's active recreation. It's fitness. It's outdoor fitness trail equipment, which is affordable now. The manufacturers have made it affordable. And that's really how you get the gender back into the facility. It's not just interior, it's exterior as well.
I haven't heard the word pickleball once yet, though. So.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we saved the best for last. That is Terry Marciello, our director of the Senior Center.
So hello, everybody. This has been a great presentation. I'm very attuned to everything that you're saying. Only little thing is, I have to say, Wilmington's very fortunate that we do have a lot of, we have a good male population that do come to our senior center. But with a very active senior group in this community, which we're very fortunate and of all ages, we conducted a survey with our senior population, and it was extremely evident, even before COVID, this was done, that space was crucial. Additional space was crucial. Mm-hmm. And just like you're saying, Mark, the outside space was crucial again before COVID, but even more now. And can you explain how you would incorporate this in the design? You kind of already somewhat answered in some ways throughout, but if there's anything that from your buildings that you've been working on, what you could give us as examples?
Yeah, let me jump in this first, and then maybe Carrie or Lee, if you guys want to pitch in. I think the multi-use flexible spaces are important. Mm-hmm. Because yesterday's senior center doesn't work anymore. I think people like bright, open, airy, multi-use spaces, so that, maybe for a year or two, something might be popular, something else might be able to take its place. And, it's easy to adapt. So I think that part of what I've learned is that adaptability and is important, and that comes through, I think, making spaces that are multi-use, flexible.
Mhm.
And also making sure that you know, if the budget can afford it, that more than one room has a sink in it, you know, so that it's not just the crafts room that gets the sink. And, you know, cooking demonstrations, open kitchens, you know, and the ability to take a space and subdivide it. Almost all the senior centers that we do have rooms that can be made into 2 rooms or 3 rooms, so that you can have some flexibility in those space. But I would say, you know, I mean, we just finished Ludlow. So we finished Ludlow just as COVID was shutting everything down. And would we have designed Ludlow slightly differently? Probably. It probably would be a little bit bigger, because you'd want some bigger spaces and maybe some, you know, more stretched out, wider hallways. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you.
All right, Jack, we have one last question.
Jack, you're muted.
Okay, I'll read it off for Jack. What makes your firm different from all the others, and why should we choose yours?
Lee, why don't you take that one?
Testing my memory now. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
On that last slide, I said we are elderly services center experts. That's what we do. We're dedicated to it. This is where we find great meaning in our profession. We've assembled a team that we've worked with before, that we love working with, that we have proven excellence with. You saw examples of our buildings. You saw our response to your RFQ. We perform on budget all the time, so that you get really, really good quality designs that you can actually afford, that you get custom tailored designs that are specific to your community, that you find meaningful, and that you want to take care of on the long haul. We create a building that resonates with you, that you're proud of, that you call your own. It's not about us.
Yeah.
Design a building anywhere. It's not about us. It's about you. It's about whether you think this is what you need and what you want, and that you love it when you're done, and you'll take care of it for 100 years. That's what sets us apart.
Great, thank you. Dan, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I'm all set. I think you guys hit all the buttons, and
All right, well, thank you for a great presentation. If no committee member has any questions or needs anything to follow up, I'd like to say thank you. That was a great presentation. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So,
Thank you.
if I can ask one last question, your process going forward, what's your timetable?
well, we have, of course, one more interview tonight, and then we're going to discuss and see if we can come up with a selection. We'll be talking with our OPM. We will schedule another meeting, and we'll be going from there. So,
Okay, great.
We look forward to
Well,
hearing from you. Thank you.
If you have any questions, feel free to give us a buzz.
great. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
again.
you all for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Dan, again, you're the man, Dan. Right on. Right on.
I have to tell you, it's just interesting. You see 3 completely different.
Completely.
Completely different.
Completely.
And
Yeah.
the 3 senior centers we have done with that firm are different, and not all of them went perfect. You know, like all architects, they have flaws too.
Mhm.
But I have to say, Ludlow is a spectacular place. I wish it was close by and you could see it, because I think you'd be. I think Terry told me that the director gave her a virtual walkthrough with her phone. It really captured what they were trying to accomplish by making it a mill feel in a mill town.
Mhm.
What do you think, Terry, of it?
Great, great open space, especially for when you first walked in. But a lot of time and effort went into putting everything all together.
I was a little surprised how much they increased the footprint from what the master facility plan, although I knew it was on the smaller side, the 14,000 square foot was what Stephen Cecil in the master facility plan had suggested, even with those increases, but not that much more, you know.
I thought the demographic chart was right on if you followed it the way they had it laid out. And again, Steve, remember he was going conservative,
right?
But looking at in the other communities they were comparing us to,
be close as to population size.
Good price tag, Diane. I like the price tag they estimated.
Yes.
I will tell you that is on the low end, very low.
That had to be on the low end because I believe
that was pre-COVID. Those are pre-COVID pricing.
That was pre-COVID. Well, thank you, Dan, for mentioning that, because I, had made a presentation where, I was talking about a 2% increase per year because those were 2017 prices.
Yeah,
he did a takeoff on.
Right.
And
well, there's more to it than just percentages. As Kerry indicated, the energy code and the climate control regulations that are going to be coming at us are going to add costs. They never reduce costs; they add costs. And UV disinfection of bathrooms by light when the bathrooms aren't being used is going to become commonplace. There's a lot of things that you're going to have that Cecil never imagined when he was doing the study. And, I think you'll see.
No one would.
Yeah, I think you'll see this being, I think you'll see it being somewhere around 17 or 18,000. And I think it'll depend on your program. Your program may dictate that some of the rooms can be multiple used and it can be 16,000. It might be 18,000, but we'll work our way through that as a committee as we move forward. That's the fun part. The programming and the initial designs are the fun part. When we start getting into the construction details, and I was pleased to hear that they talked a little bit about that. George and I have a lot of work on those, and we'll be explaining all of that to you as we're going through it. But the programming's three pretty pictures and 2 pretty elevations. The construction documents are 100 pages and 4-inch thick specification book, and we got to turn those colored pictures into those documents that are bulletproof, so that the bidders, when they're bidding it, can't come back after us and have increasing costs. So there's a lot of parts and pieces that we got to go through in the next coming months. But it was different. It was certainly different than the first 2. And I think you're going to find this next one to be even more different.
Yeah, very interesting.
I would just like to make a comment that I was very impressed that they came out and suggested a much bigger center than what was previously indicated, because it's been one of my concerns from day one that we would not build to the future. And building to just accommodate what we think seniors will need, and actually thinking about how many seniors are we going to have, what type of flexibility do we need? As somebody mentioned earlier, billiards may not be in style in 15 years. Whoever heard of pickleball 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Need to have flexibility, and flexibility often demands a lot of space. And I would rather build this for the future and build it right, and not be looking at this in 5 or 7 or 8 years and saying, gee, we don't have enough storage room for certain things, or we cannot do a certain outdoor project because it just isn't enough room. This is a one-time shot that we have to make it right. And I think sizing is crucial. It's
Sure.
probably the number 2 or 3 item that is on my list besides location and community acceptance. The size of it has to be appropriate so that we can grow with this center.
As you're talking about increasing the size, Jeff's over there goinkulating his 5-year capital plan. So don't give him a stroke before we get through the last one.
That's all right.
I honestly, when we do the programming, it's going to come out at 20,000 feet. And then when we really look at the programming, it's going to start shrinking. And we're going to come to a median where Terry says, you know what, this is really all the program we're going to be able to do or afford. There's a whole bunch of things that we have to talk about.
Right.
Because staffing, you only have a limited amount of staff and a limited amount of people. So there's a lot of things we're going to get to when we get into programming.
And to
I totally agree with Teresa. I totally agree.
Yeah, I thought that was great because look into the future, it's that flexibility and to be able to expand. I mean,
Absolutely,
I
right on.
underlined those right there. That was exactly what they said.
Absolutely. The 2 most important things.
All right, we have a few minutes before our next one. So if you want to take a break, do what you have to do, and then we'll come right back.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like this guy. Sweet. Right.
Another architect come in. Well, everything is by Zoom. No fine.
Bathroom break's over. One more to go.
Everybody else is gone, but John, the electrician's here, working on one of my lights.
George, where are you having Easter? At your house?
Yeah, we're doing it at my house. My daughter's coming in the morning. We're gonna have breakfast, and then my brother's gonna come over later and we'll have dinner. So how about you?
We're having the kids over.
Yeah,
Very
awesome.
exciting. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's our first like formal dinner since a year ago Christmas.
Wow.
Out of the house, so we haven't been seeing them. We never saw them for any of the winter holidays.
They're all grown now, Teresa?
Yeah.
Are they all grown? Really?
They're
Out
all
of the house?
grown.
Oh my gosh.
Well, the younger one's only 25. He has a tendency to circle around.
Yeah. Oh, good.
But yeah, they're all gone.
They're all gone.
From
But they
all
live-
home, so that's good. They're not coming back.
Yeah. But I
my
mean, they
daughter,
live here, right?
I'm sorry?
They live near you.
Yeah, one's in Reading, Woburn, and Charlestown.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. I have a little further to go. Houston,
know.
Texas, and Long Island.
Yeah.
I don't know what I did wrong, but
I know. But at least that gives you flexibility.
in Florida, yeah, in
Yeah.
Florida. Right.
When all your kids stay in the same general area, I think my kids they all love Boston, so they're all going to stay in this area.
Yeah.
It kind of makes us have to stay here. Like,
Yes.
Spread
Yeah.
out like your children are, Diane, then you could say, well, I can go anywhere. You can what?
You
It's gonna
know-
involve a plane ride.
It's only a
You
plane
know,
ride.
you say that, and everybody says to me, your kids aren't there, your grandkids are spread, what holds you to Wilmington? But there is something that I find it very difficult to leave. I really, really do. We first got married, we moved here, and my kids had an excellent education, and they, God bless them, they're both doing very well. But that's why I said to my husband, I love Florida because I hate the winters, but I love the town of Wilmington. I was
Okay.
never ever sorry that I lived there. Never sorry.
I feel the same way. Not having grown up here and having chosen Wilmington.
Yeah.
My husband periodically will say to me, wow, this town's been really good to us. We're always safe. We still feel safe here. I mean, I have a lot of friends in Wilmington. And, it's a wonderful town. It's just the right size.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to leave.
It is. It's a very, very tough one to leave. And, land, there just isn't, I really think senior housing is such an important issue that this town has to tackle, because it's the people like myself at my age and my husband's age. I would love to stay here and move into a smaller single family home in a community, in a development, maybe with mixed use, housing, and be actively involved with the senior center. And I'm one of those that loves to get involved in programs and the pickleball and the whatever else. My husband does the trivia from here. He wouldn't miss a trivia one. And so, but
Even
the
had
one-
his prize hand delivered down to Florida.
yes, he did. He did. She came and we had a wonderful time. She has a very nice friend, and we spent a couple hours together. It was really, really nice, and to have them stop by. And they asked, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? Well, my grandson is graduating Tulane in May. So we have to go to New Orleans. We just were talking to him today, and the graduation is the 21st. So so we've already made our reservations. We're going to go see him and participate. So that's my daughter's oldest, and then her other son, who is going to be a senior, went down last week to visit his brother for the first time and spend time. And he said, came home and said to his mother, I'm putting that on the list. I'm putting that on the list, Mom. He said, I could do better in a warmer climate school than a cold one.
All right, Andrew, do we have BH in the waiting room?
We do.
Okay.
All right, if you want to let them in.
Yep.
Good evening, everybody. My name is George Hooper. I'm the chairman of the Senior Center Building Committee. I'm going to have the individual members introduce themselves to you. Diane?
I'm Diane Allen. I'm a member of the Permanent Building Committee and the Master Facilities Plan Committee.
Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Malorani, a member of the Permanent Building Committee.
Jack?
Jack Holloway, member of the Permanent Building Committee.
Teresa?
Hi, I'm Teresa Manganelli. I'm Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, and I served on the Facilities Master Plan Committee.
Greg?
Hi, good evening, folks. I'm Greg Bendel, and I have the good fortune of serving on the Wilmington Board of Selectmen.
Terry?
Hi, I'm Terry Marciello, Director of Elderly Services.
All right, also with us tonight is Jeff Hall, the town manager, and our host for Zoom is Andrew Fredette. We'll be asking you a series of questions. We have about 12 questions, so you'll have about 20 minutes to do your presentation, and you can start at any time.
Okay, can you all hear us?
Yes.
And are you seeing our screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So, well, thank you. I know Dan's there, and committee members, we appreciate being here. My name's Joel Bargman, and I'm joined by Rachel Young and Lance Hill tonight. I'm a principal at BH+A, and as I mentioned, we really appreciate the opportunity tonight. We love to work on senior centers. It's really an area of specialization for us. I just wanted to start by framing the building. We get a lot of satisfaction about designing the places. We need to remember that these are for people. It's not just about the building. And what we're trying to do is optimize the quality of life for the older adults that use your facility and their caregivers as well. So our goal tonight will be to show you how we can offer some welcoming and meaningful opportunities to engage and empower seniors in these facilities, with the goal of their being able to remain in Wilmington and be valued community members. The promise that I'm not going to do the greatest hits of BH+A tonight, but I do want to just click a couple boxes about our background. We've done tremendous number of senior centers. The ones in bold indicate senior centers that are really our secondary area of specialty, which is site selection, site analysis, and getting towns to a consensus of where the best location for their center is, and then voting positively for the senior center. Our job in this regard, as you can see on the left, the buildings look quite different depending on the community. We try not to tip the table. Our job is to provide a level of information that is unbiased and let the process grow organically over time. And the thing that's most exciting to me is that often the proponents and opponents to a particular site or a project value our services and our approach, and that really helps to lead to a unbiased presentation and a positive outcome for the most part. We've done 100+ public facilities. Our projects are mission-based in the social services, primarily senior services, but we also do youth and children's services. But Chapter 149 is a particular area of expertise. A little bit boring of a slide, but it's important to define the team. We want to define a building that works across all your sites so that folks are making a decision about a location and not a program if they look at Main Street or School Street. The building is a level consideration, the site's the variable. We have a team that will look at your building. We have a team of Lance and our landscape architect that will look at your sites. And we have a team that will look at both, particularly from a sustainability point of view and from a cost estimating point of view. CHA has been our cost estimator for 20 years, and that's really an important characteristic in getting our projects funded and built within the funding allocation. Rachel Young is going to discuss the building tonight. Lance will lead the site discussion. Lance is our civil engineer. Rachel's a senior associate. And I wrap up the package with the site selection schematic design presentation. We call it a feasibility study. And so my job is to put that wrapping paper on the process. There's a lot of moving parts. We're going to try to stick to 20 minutes here. So let me turn this over to Rachel to discuss the building parts, and then Lance and I will discuss site parts. Rachel?
Thank you, Joel. So again, my name is Rachel Young, and if you choose to work with us, I would be the project manager for your feasibility study. While I regret that we couldn't be with you in person tonight to give an interview, I do appreciate on the lighter side that I'm not burdened by wearing heels. If you saw us in person, you would see that Joel is pushing over 6 feet and I'm barely 5. And we make quite the odd couple when we do interviews together. And usually I have to compensate by wearing, quite tall heels. So thank you. My primary goal is to really understand your center and its mission, but primarily it's to know the right questions to ask and to listen to your answers. Ultimately, the outcome of the feasibility study is going to be a unique building, as Joel was stressing earlier, that reflects Wilmington, reflects your seniors, and reflects your staff. Below is our understanding of your mission, and as Joel hit upon earlier, I think what we're really trying to create here is a building that optimizes the quality of life, empowers seniors, and as Joel had said, the ultimate goal is to have them be a remaining independent entity within your community and a community asset. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we start the feasibility process by identifying your program. And these are the primary activities we understand as we understand them to be. So volunteering, learning, a wellness space, a visiting nurse perhaps, a place where they can improve their health with active classes, a location for information gathering, especially in this day and age, that's critical to a senior center. And then of course, I think the most important aspect of a senior center, yours particularly, would be a space to socialize. Next slide, please. So we'll work with you to further define your program. And I think a good place to start is by looking at the activities that you have programmed. So this is a slide, this is an image from Sturbridge Senior Center, but similarly, we would look at what you have scheduled on a typical day, a typical week, to really understand what your spaces need to do. And so these activities would then inform the spaces we design for you. And I want to stress again that every center is unique, as the next set of photos would illustrate. And forgive me, just one sidebar I didn't want to overlook is that when we are identifying your program and honing in on what's most important for your community, sometimes it's a learning opportunity for us as well. This is a survey that we had done for Norton recently, and we were certain that a makerspace was going to be one of the more popular spaces just based on preliminary conversations we had had. And then it turns out that no, it was the exercise room that was really something that the community valued. And so for us, it was an opportunity to reevaluate the program with the client and proceed from there. Next. So these are the images I was referring to that really illustrate how each senior center is unique. Just to touch on a few, Randolph had an intergenerational community center, so shared with seniors and teens and every age in between. And what they asked for was a greenhouse, which was a first for us. So that's the center image. And then you have Vine Street Senior Center, which has this big, beautiful blue room, which was intended to be a gallery space for all of these wonderful portraits they had commissioned of their senior population. These are like the founding members of some of their social institutions. Then you had in the lower, what would be my lower right-hand corner, that fantastic workout room that looks like it could belong to any state-of-the-art Y. That's at the Falmouth Senior Center. So obviously exercise was really important to them, and they, you know, pulled out all the stops in creating the space. But then conversely, I don't have an image of this, but the Situate Senior Center has a total of 3 pieces of workout equipment. So you can see how each center is unique, and, you know, we're designing a space for those particular communities. So related to this is when we are designing these spaces, we want to make sure that we right size them. So these program rooms could, you know, you could have a cafe that's 200 square feet, 600 square feet or larger, and it's really trying to figure out what size works for your particular program. And it's not just about the program spaces, but it's also about underlook spaces like circulation, hallways, stairs, and also even storage. I mean, for us, it's really important to get the storage right, whether it's making sure that the cabinets are the right size to fit your plates, to whether we need to design a closet that's big enough to fit a baby grand. We've done everything from one to the other. But one of the spaces that is really most important to any senior center is the indispensable multipurpose room. This is going to be the largest room in any senior center. It's going to be the one that's really doing the heavy lifting, so to speak. And it comes with the kitchen that you can kind of see in that back view there poking through the window. Next slide, please. And the kitchen, interestingly enough, it doesn't just have to be a commercial kitchen. We're finding increasingly that the current kitchens that we've been designing most recently are not just commercial kitchens that can be used by trained staff and volunteers, but they have more of a residential feel. They might use residential appliances that a lay volunteer is more accustomed to and comfortable with. And they're also becoming more of a program room, not just a support space. So they're a place where you can do classes like lifestyle classes or cooking classes. And they're kind of, it's expanding the definition, if you will, of a kitchen. Another point I just want to hit on with this slide is that when we're designing these spaces, when we're designing these centers, we don't want to just generalize or put all seniors into one category. We have to recognize that seniors come in multiple generations. And whether it's 60, 70, 80, or 90, those subsets of your population all have specific needs. And especially in a feasibility study, it's really important to make sure that we're hearing from all of those subsets of the population, that we're really making sure that all of their needs are being addressed. Another aspect of designing your space is really understanding how flexible you want it. Do you want a lot of operable partitions like you have in the lower right-hand corner? This is even an animation, Joel. Yeah, there you go. Showing you that fantastic blue operable partition and work. Do you want an operable partition that can make a space more flexible? Do you want a collapsible ping pong table, or do you want something that's more dedicated like this beautiful billiard room that we have here? After this discussion of program has been had, and we really feel like we understand what you do with your space, how you serve your community, we would quantify it. We would look at the numbers. Again, how big do these spaces have to be? How small do they have to be? And I think one of the benefits of our particular firm is that we have a lot of knowledge that we can bring to the table, and we can help you understand, based on past precedents and projects we've completed, what a minimum size might be for a room to a maximum size. And that gives you some flexibility in designing your space. This is a conceptual floor plan. This would be the next step in the feasibility process, where we would take all that information, the data that we've collected, the program that we've quantified, and we would start to put it into actual spaces. And so here you can see that you can see the size of the rooms and also their adjacencies, what rooms they're connected with, how they're furnished, what storage they have. And even in this example, we're showing you how the room is used throughout the day, what programming would go into that particular space. And that really helps you to understand, okay, how used is this room? What is going to be the burden on us for setup and breakdown? Because it's really important that we don't overburden a room, so to speak, because then you run into a situation like this, which is where you have this one room that's doing so much heavy lifting for the center. It's viewing from a meal room to like a half hour later, a fitness activity. And that's just, it's a really hard thing to set up and break down efficiently, and it really overburdens the staff. And now I'm going to pass it back to Joel.
Thanks, Rachel. A lot of parts here, and we're going to jump into site parts. As we look at your 4 sites, or maybe 5 if you have some other ones that come up, there's a number of criteria, from zoning dimensions to parking capacity, access, floodplains. there's actually 6 pages of data like this, that what we do is organize across your 4 sites, 1, 2, 3, 4, and present all this data, the facts, just the facts, and everything is aligned up equally. So one site doesn't have any more information than another site. Our engineering, Lance's firm, will do a traffic report of each site. And these are really important because opponents generally focus on traffic and parking. So we really want to be out in front of that, not leave any answer unanswered, any question unanswered. The 2 important issues are in the lower, it's coming out of the Middlesex Avenue site. You know, what's your left turn? What's your site distance, which is the chart on the right? What's required and what's provided for each site? Very important for a senior center. The upper chart shows for different sites in Chatham what the parking capacity would be. For example, if you're next to the Parish of the Transfiguration, is there an opportunity for shared parking that might diminish requirements for that particular site? Amy at PAR will also chart where the peak demand of parking is. What we found in Norton on our feasibility study is that we had ended up with a joint town hall senior center site. And knowing when the senior center peaked and when the town hall peaked allowed us to right size the parking spaces, right size the entries. Who knows whether you might have a multi-user site here. So knowing how the parking works. Also, from a distance, we would like to be 125 feet from a parking space to the front door. Can we make that work on your site? And can it be nice and level like the site on the right, or is the slope more than 2% and difficult for seniors to navigate? All those go into our analysis. And let me turn it on to Lance for a moment here. Lance?
Yes, hi. My name is Lance Hill. I'm with PAR Corporation. We are about a 100+ employee firm I'm based out of Foxborough, Mass. We've been supporting Joel on these types of projects for a number of years. We've done a number of projects with them. Let me tell you a little bit about me first. I'm a civil engineer by trade and worked a lot of my side on the private side. But I also was a public works director and city engineer. So I have quite a bit of experience working from an owner's perspective, and I kind of understand a little bit of how these buildings operate. So I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But our process on these type of projects here, we follow a very strategic and laid out process, a checklist of all of the different constraints that each property that we're evaluating might have. And we try to take a look at everything and have a fair and balanced comparison on each site. We then generate those into site constraint maps that we're able to utilize in helping make the decisions on which sites to select. So, very excited about this project here because you've actually got 4 really great sites. We've done some preliminary looking at the sites here, and most of the time that we're doing some work on these type of feasibilities, we get some sites that are very small and constrained and very hard to navigate around. At first glance, all of these look to be pretty good sites to start with here, so we're very excited about that. What I've done here is taken one of the sites and just kind of showed you how we walk through our analysis on each of the sites. We start with the constraints map that you can kind of see in the background with where the flood zones might be or where the wellhead protection zone is the case with this site here. This is the Main Street site. And then we take a look at how does the building fit on the site. Well, we work very closely with Rachel and Joel on what the building footprint looks like. And the parking is a really important aspect of it because some zoning requirements have you have twice as much parking as you need. Some actually have you have half the parking that you need. So working with and listening with the community really helps us balance how is that parking gonna work the site, and what kind of impact does that have on the neighbors? You know, are you starting to get close to the neighbors? Are you far enough away? Is it laying out on the site where you're not cutting down all of your trees and clear cutting? You know, the sites that you have here, there's a lot of nice wooded features available. And then we take a look at how does the building layout. As I said, I've got some experience being on the owner's side of things. So one of the things that we've learned is laying the building out with the front door facing with the south or towards the south to take advantage of snow melt in the winter time. Snow's a big issue for senior centers in general. And if you have a north-facing door and sloping towards the door, you're going to constantly have icing issues at that door. I presume you probably have some of that going on at the existing site where you have a north-facing door right now. The last thing we take a look at is how does the stormwater get addressed? You know, I know it's a feasibility study, but these types of things start to take up a lot of land on the site. And, you know, a lot of engineers, I call it, they suffer from immediate practicality syndrome. You know, they take a look and say, this little square box works the best for us here. But they don't necessarily take into account, how is it going to be operated and maintained in the future? Does the DPW have a truck to be able to clean that out? You know, is the less expensive route that we're going to take today going to force the town to buy a $300,000 Vector truck to clean this facility out? So we really work hard to try to look and see how all of these come into play, and what we really try to balance them all to is you know, how does that affect the cost? And we understand cost is the big driver on the sites, and really or what's evaluated when you get to the public meetings. So that's really where we have our focus heading into.
Thanks, Lance. So back to this idea of the building and the site, and I think this picture is a good one for what I'm trying to convey. Rachel's going to define a building that is a level building across your opportunity sites. And what we want to do is identify the site cost drivers that make one site more expensive than another, and accurately estimate those. Do we have a different foundation? Do we have wetlands to deal with, or some of the other issues that Lance mentioned? Those site drivers and other factors get estimated in detail. So for example, if we were doing the estimate of the town hall site, we would have to account for hazardous materials that may be in the caulking material of your mullions, or the lead paint that may be on this older building, and the disposal of those windows and that facade. So those unique aspects have to go in. We're not just putting a square foot cost on it. On the left, we have your 4 sites sort of from another project, but an example of bringing detail on the right into a summary on the left. Then we present that to a community, and initially we'll present it sort of as a range: site work, building, and is there a collateral impact? The Whitefield school site on Middlesex Avenue, you may have to replace a playing field, and does that have to go into this equation or not? So we give at the initial pass a range, so it's not too precise, and then as we narrow down the sites, we make that range into a final cost. But this shows how 4 sites lined up in Falmouth. Our process is really great. Our estimate to actual is very successful. And I want to emphasize, in the estimated cost, when we say it's 6.85 million and it comes in at 6.2, there's an additional 5 to 10% contingency carried above that 6.8 million for changes that the owners might make or things that you encounter at the site. So we don't want to come in that close to the budget. And then the idea of, we don't want any unanswered question. Some voters say, well, I like the building, but I'm nervous about the additional impact this building may have on the operating costs. What is that going to do to the town's budget? The current budget for this facility was $236,000. New building would add $386,000 annually to the operating cost of the senior center. It was a senior center that went from a 2,500 square foot building to a 17,000 square foot building. So as we get to the end, I'd like to say it's a little bit like You Can't Hurry Love, that great song. It has to happen organically. We have to present the data, and people have to understand why one site is better than the other. And one way of doing that is taking all the different criteria that we've had and working with the group, working with Dan and your team, ranking each site, and that helps give us, at one level, an understanding of what might be good or what might be bad in terms of site selections. At the end of the day, may be a bigger issue. Location, cost, some of these smaller variable factors may not weigh in as much as some of the bigger issues of cost. Rachel? Rachel, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, forgive me. I muted myself. I was afraid that there might be some background noise. I didn't want to be a distraction. So to go back to what we were discussing earlier about really striving to create a unique center. In the feasibility study, we would start to look at the exterior of the building as well. Typically, we provide exterior renderings that show you what the outside of the building would look like. And so we want to start a conversation about that early on in the feasibility study, especially because we realize a feasibility study is the gateway to the next step for this project, and you want to be able to sell it in essence to the community. So having a good rendering that represents the feel of the center is really helpful for getting community buy-in and excitement. For you, we really want to start to understand what makes Wilmington, Wilmington, what makes it look special as compared to another town that is nearby, what makes it have that identity. And so we just begin by looking at what the notable buildings are in the community and what makes them sing. And then can we take some of those elements and put them into the building? Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Joe. And so sometimes that means, in the case of the central image there, that's that like beige color with the porch, this is Cohasset. It means looking at all of the beautiful historic little buildings in Cohasset and saying, what about these buildings is really unique to Cohasset? Is it the number of lights in a window? Is it the color of the clapboard? Is it the way that the entrance to the an old house is detailed? And you take each one of those aspects and you try to find a place for it in your design. Conversely, you might have a center like above it, which is Randolph, their intergenerational center, which they wanted something that was really modern, something that didn't necessarily have a contextual precedent in their town. They wanted something that was new, that was exciting for the town. And so we went in a different direction. This is the schedule. Sorry, I think that I don't want to run out of time, but I'll press on. This is the schedule that we're proposing for you. And I think just the main takeaway, I'll give you a second to look it over, but is that the summer is going to be critical for us. We want to be able to have enough community input over the summer months so that we can go to the town in the fall with a really strong proposal. And that's going to be a challenge. Summer months are always difficult. They're when people tend to go out of town, you get less community interest. But I think this year, especially when we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, people are really going to want to travel and resume those vacations that they were deprived of for a year. So that would be our one concern. And for that reason, I think doing virtual outreach is going to be really important to make sure that we get as much information and consensus from the community. Joel?
So that outreach is shown in this slide, and the outreach happens in a number of different scales, either a small scale, working with staff, voting on programs and amenities, moderated workshops where citizens in the town pick out into groups and advocate for one site versus the other, presentation to town meetings. And we've done two projects, a full site selection and a full building design from scratch without one public meeting, 100% online. So it is possible to do it and make it work. We've started an outreach plan for Wilmington. And you can see, outreach is not just the public. We want to work with your departments. Does the veterans have an issue in the senior center? The health department, Commission on Disabilities, the recreation department want to offer programming. How can we learn? How can we outreach to all your different communities, learn about furniture, IT requirements, and then present that information to town? So Rachel had that schedule. This outreach plan would work into that schedule and culminate with presentations to selectmen, finance committee, CPC if a field relocation can be funded, etc. The result of that is, example, Situate, we had a huge victory, the vote in the town meeting was 5-1 in the ratio for versus against. That was really a factor of outreach, and as Rachel mentioned, giving people an example of what it's going to look, such as Needham's, site plans, and then the interior design as well. So it's not just the outside. In closing, I think our topics, we're running a little late, so I'm going to go close up quickly here. We tried to address these topics, but at the end of the day, we're very close to Wilmington. We're 20 minutes away. We're a hands-on firm. Rachel and I will do your project. And what we want to show you is that these different parts are really intended to work together, that Wilmington, P3, the architect, the contractor, ultimately the senior center, all have to work in tandem and as a team. And we think that we can pull this off and get to a successful consensus with the community. And with that, we'll open it up for your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. All right, so our first question will go out to Paul Moriarty.
Thanks for being here tonight. Great presentation. So my question for you is, has your firm met design timelines for, say, your last 10 or so projects? And if not, what were the reasons for the delays?
That's a good question. We always meet the timeline, and I sort of want to be careful about how I answer that, because I don't want you to feel that we're a big corporate firm. We're really a very hands-on firm. Rachel, Lance, and I are your team, but BH+A does happen to be a 50-person architecture firm, so we have resources to apply to the project. So I like to say we offer the benefits of a really small firm and the benefits of the capacity of a large firm. And by having Rachel and I and Lance involved in the site selection and programming, it really is how all our projects work. And Rachel would take the project through construction administration, and that's what makes the timeline work and why we manage our schedules very successfully in the office. So we have not had any misses on our timelines at all.
Great, thank you.
Number 2, Teresa.
Yes, thank you for that great presentation. I believe that you addressed a big piece of this question in your presentation, but considering your last similar project to the Wilmington project, how did the original cost estimate compare to the final cost? And if there was a difference, would you please explain why?
Rachel, would you want to, I talked about that, but maybe you want to address that and talk about how we built in the contingencies at Situate and how we managed the furniture bidding to work within that estimate?
Sure. So project I'm currently wrapping up, it's so close to being 100% done, is the senior center in Situate. And this was a unique project because it was a new construction for a senior center, but on an existing site where there was an existing building that needed to be demolished, a considerable amount of site work on an existing site. And so for us, the contingencies that we really wanted to pay attention and be ahead of, if you will, was the site work. Was, were we going to find some kind of latent condition when we started to demolish that previous school building that we took down? And so those were the ways that we were able to really stay on top of the budget. And then Joel had alluded to some other aspects of the project, specifically the furniture selection. And for us, that was working. We had a tight budget to work within for the furniture. And we were able to do that by really coming to the owner with some various options. Say, if you really want this, this is something we might have to rein back on. And can we get creative about how we can get you everything you need?
I'll just add that I know that P3 will want us to carry at least a 5%, if not more, contingency on the project. And that is above and beyond this estimate. And that's really helpful for certain, as Rachel mentioned, like the town hall site that may have latent issues that we're not familiar with. But we work really hard, and as I already mentioned, we work with the same cost estimator for the last 20 years on these projects, so they know us and we know them, and they've done all our senior centers, and so it makes it for a better estimating process, we think.
Joel, can I ask you on your slide there, just the Sandwich Senior Center, everything else seems to be pretty much spot on, but what you budgeted was 13 million and your actual came out at 10.9, I think. So,
well, I have to congratulate you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and I meant to mention that the 13.2 million was the estimate that we did right before we started into COVID, and the town realized that there may be a benefit to getting this job done as quickly as possible. So working with Sandwich, we expedited the design and the construction drawings, and with our OPM, we got this project out on the street when there was virtually no bidding. Even though we had a pre-qualified bid, we had 11 contractors submit bids, and 6 were within 5% of the low bidder, which is a pretty phenomenal undertaking. So the difference is 13.2 is the budget established pre-COVID, and then we quickly pivoted to take advantage of the market condition, and we went from $550 a square foot to $475. And now we're working with the contractor and gently adding some features in, actually able to make that building net zero and putting solar collectors on. But that explains why that difference was there.
Very good, thank you.
And it may pertain to your project. We have 2 clients that are working with us to expedite projects and get them out to bid late summer, early fall to, again, take advantage of this current market condition.
All right, Jack, question number 3.
Yes, what did your firm do to assure a quality product and workmanship?
Well, Rachel, you've done CA. Why don't you speak to that?
I think it's always important to have a good relationship with the contractor. I think that I've been blessed that the superintendent is a very approachable guy that I have a good relationship with. You can call him up, field a question, get an answer quickly from him, and vice versa. And that good working relationship means I can ask things that the client deserves. So I know that when I approach him and say, hey, I don't really love the way this is, what can we do about it? I know we're going to have a fair conversation about it and get it resolved in an amicable way. That's invaluable. But of course, there are other ways that you can ensure that you're getting a quality product, and, having mock-ups, reviewing, having pre-installation or pre-construction meetings with any of the trades, and also really knowing from previous projects what might not have turned out so well that you have to keep your eye open to going into the next project. Let me see if I can think of an example. One project, or one thing that seems to never work out very well it always seems to have hiccups, let's put it that way, because we catch it, we fix it. But ceiling cassettes, fan coil units, and having them centered nicely in a ceiling tile, that's my big pet peeve. You can talk to a mechanical subcontractor till you're blue in the face in the beginning of a project saying, this must be dead center. I don't want to see it off center when the ceiling guy comes in to a ceiling tile. And they might not get it, and they're going to have a real hard time fixing it after the fact. So I've now learned after my like 5th time doing this, you know, with this particular project, that you really have to make sure they understand what you're asking for in the beginning of the project, that they're going to have a really hard time centering that ceiling cassette if they don't do it in the beginning. And if that means using a laser level, whatever it takes for them to get that dead center, they're going to need to do it first. That's just an example.
I think Rachel's point's great, that Ben Franklin says an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of work at the end of the remedy. So that pre-construction meeting is really helpful.
Greg?
Thank you. The architect is the head of the design team. Can you tell us a little bit more about your key staff and consultants for the project? I know we've met you folks here tonight, but give the opportunity to elaborate on your team.
Yeah. I'll just go up to an earlier slide here. So the team has been with us for over 10 years. Allied Engineering is a medium to small hands-on firm in Littleton, not far from the site. And they're particularly involved in senior centers because they've pioneered the VRF system. I have a slideshow if you're interested in showing what we're doing post-COVID with our senior centers. And one of the things we're doing is these VRF systems that treat each room 100% individually from a fresh air and heating and cooling perspective. So they're ideally organized to address the senior center and the needs of the post-COVID environment. Foley, Buell, Roberts, Dan may remember our engineer for Falmouth is retired. Foley, Buell has picked up that work, and they did the Sandwich Senior Center. And our interior staff is all in-house to BH+A. I don't know if the references mentioned it, but we take a great deal of pride in our interiors and the quality of the space. As Lance mentioned, PAR has worked with us on all those senior center projects, not only on the engineering, but on the traffic and parking. And KZLA, as our landscape architect, has been on the Sandwich, Chatham senior centers, but they have a 20-year relationship. And the green aspects, while we have LEED and other passive house accredited professionals in the office, bringing the green engineer from West Concord into the project is really helpful because they have information about grants that you may be able to achieve either for different levels of insulation and other rebates on the project. And they'll look at site and building sustainability to increase your or to decrease your operating costs and management of the site. And what Lance mentioned was really crucial, getting the vectors that clean out the sediment, and that is really important to consider. And then finally, CHA was formerly known as Daedalus, and that's our cost estimator. They've been with us for 20 years doing projects. But what's most important is that Rachel and I have worked together for a number of years on very similar senior center projects. Yep. And have a great relationship for who does what in managing the process.
Thank you.
As well as Lance.
Diane?
As you know, Wilmington is having another building project running about the same time as the senior center project. And I would like to know, and the committee would like to know, could you explain how you would coordinate with the designer on that other project and help build a consensus as to the best site location for each project?
Right. So I've been through this before in in Norton and a couple other sites, most recently Norton. And there were two of us. One was doing the senior center, was us, and one was doing the town hall site. What we ended up doing was, I'm just trying to get this slide back. Oops. Okay. Right. As we get the information developed, what I had put into the outreach plan was an opportunity to, step 8, start a dialogue with your town hall, school administration, architecture, PM team. Once we knew enough about the COA program where we could define a building size, parking lot size, and we could begin to share data in a meaningful way with that particular architect. And then from step 8, we would intend to build on our information with them as to what we found in terms of what works and doesn't work, and exchange information with them, and then learn what might be most important to them as well. So it's not just getting information to them, but it's receiving, is that site on Middlesex Avenue, because it's so central to the other buildings down in the center of Wilmington, is that going to really lock in on the town hall and we should focus elsewhere? Those are the things that we need to learn from your other team, but it's a collaborative process. I think that, we know what that process is. And the process worked so well in Norton that the town realized that they could save a significant amount of money by jointly locating the senior center and their other facility study on the same site. You save on all your site work, sewer connections, etc. So I think that shows the ability we have to collaborate with these other teams for a sort of unexpected outcome.
Thank you.
Does anything about Wilmington having the multiple projects and site options concern you?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
Anything about Wilmington having these multiple projects and site options available concern you? So meaning jockeying for one preferred site, looking at different things?
I might throw that to Lance, because I think he did a great job of opening this by saying you have 4 really great sites. And, maybe let Lance, do you want to talk to that question?
Sure. Yeah. It's a great question because I think that you're going to find some of the sites are going to be better for some of the use, one of the uses over the other. I'm not so sure. You might end up with direct competition there, but you might. And I think, as Joel had said, is along the way, that collaboration, especially early and often, I think is going to go a long way. And what is it that works better for your project? What is it that works better for this project? But that competition, I think there's a couple of great sites out there that might be vied heavily for either one of the sites. I think either the town hall or the senior center. So I'm not so sure I'm concerned about it. I mean, this project, if we were selected for this project, that's our focus and our goal.
I'd say that the other aspect about this is sort of how I tried to open our presentation was, at the end of the day, it's about the people. We're trying to build a senior center to serve seniors. And what we need to get the community to understand is there's no perfect site. Every project site has some issues with it. There can be a perfect project at the end of this when it's successful and the building opens. And that's really the goal of the project. So what we want to do is really work with the community, and if there are sentiments as you're expressing, convey that the end goal is to have 2 successful projects. and why a compromise on one side or the other may be beneficial as a whole to the community. And that's really our job, is to present that data, not to be a biased advocate, but to present the facts.
And the last thing I would say, Joel, too, is that I think really smart upfront thinking, is something that our team certainly brings as a strong suit. But to lay out a site so that it doesn't preclude additional development if in the future there was additional things that wanted to come out there, including maybe jointly siting the two projects. I think that having that upfront design thinking from the very beginning and that collaboration will go a long way.
Thank you. Paul, number 7.
Hi, tell us something about senior center designs that your firm handles differently than other firms, and how that could be advantageous to the town of Wilmington.
I think that and we'll jump to a different question. It was really about COVID, but I think I'm sorry. I just want to share a couple ideas that are different. Each one of our program rooms is designed, as I mentioned, as a separate unit, completely independent, air conditioning, heating, sound-wise. And it's also 100% broadcast ready so that you can reach homebound seniors as well as seniors that may come to your center. We don't want to exclude citizens that can't make it to the senior center, and we really want that space to be interactive. And so that technology is built into our budgets. I think as Rachel pointed out, every space is a program space, so our kitchen can be a learning, teaching, activity space as much as it is Meals on Wheels and a congregate meals kitchen. It serves many, many different purposes. And then it's a little bit hard to see this, but in Chatham, we have program rooms. And what's a little different is that we have a program room that's outside, built into the space originally. Turned out to be a great COVID-19 measure. Integrating the building, the spaces with the outdoors, I think has been a defining characteristic of our architecture. And that's also been a defining feature of post-COVID environment. But folks being able to go outside and have a program, or in many of our projects, outside trails, outside activities emanate from the senior center, really helpful and expand program. And I think that's a unique driver for our projects.
That's great insight. Thank you.
Teresa, number 8.
Yes. Have you ever had to exercise your errors and omissions policy in the past 10 years?
Not in the past 10 years, no.
Okay, in the past 15 years?
When there may be a potential claim, you exercise your policy. So there, in 15 years, there's been issues that have come up that we've had to exercise it. They didn't ultimately end up in a claim, but we did have to bring those to the attention of the insurance company.
Okay, thank you.
Number 9, Greg.
Thank you. I know we talked about this earlier. I hope you can elaborate just a bit. What changes in building HVAC designs or other design elements do you believe will or should be made from what we've learned from the current pandemic?
Well, one is this picture. Our spaces are a little bit bigger. We design for social distancing in our multipurpose rooms. And this is a multipurpose room for a project like yours that we're taking to town meeting this spring. And the amount of windows, connection to the outdoor, the amount of fresh air, really important. As I mentioned here, these little ceiling units are what Allied Engineering brings to the project. Every room has its own heating and cooling and ventilation system, so there's no cross-pollination from room to room. The food service here is in a sealed container, so it's much more. We don't have food even with sneeze guards. We have now food in sealed compartments. So you do have a grab and go area, but it's contained, it's safe, and it's secure. This is a really interesting thing that happened for reasons that have to do with the site. Falmouth's lobby is in the back of the building. You walk down this hallway, you can see how generous the spaces are, and that's really a post-COVID characteristic. But every person that's come into Falmouth from other senior centers, directors and that, really love the lobby, not being at the front door, because front door delivery folks aren't coming through and potentially bringing in contaminants. But seniors are in the back of the building protected. And if we wanted to, we designed this so that you could put glass doors, French doors, completely separate out the lobby from the rest of the space to, again, give you that 100% separation in your heating and ventilation system. Allied also brings this, and we're putting this in Sandwich right now. You want to bring fresh air into the building, but 10 or 12 fresh airs per hour are very expensive. So we maximize the amount of fresh air by supplementing the return air and the fresh air with these GUV. It's a ultraviolet filter where the interior air gets recirculated through that filter. We can recirculate the entire room in half an hour while the occupants are in the space. They're not seeing the ultraviolet light. And it's another way to purify the air without running your budget into sky-high costs for your reheat coils for fresh air in the building. And I mentioned, the outdoor classrooms and Chatham, we had our nurses station upstairs. Post-COVID, we're moving mechanical upstairs and bringing the nurse downstairs. What we found is, and we built it into Sandwich with a full health department. Senior centers are great facilities for health nurses and health departments and dispensing of vaccines.
Can you say what changes have you seen in the past 5-10 years concerning the needs of the seniors? I know you've done a lot of mechanical and stuff, but now we're talking about the seniors. And how would you accommodate their needs in a new senior center?
And that was what we've seen for changes in seniors.
Seniors themselves.
Yeah.
The people, the individuals.
Yeah. So Rachel, do you want to talk about the young seniors and the interior design aspects? Yeah.
Sure. I think just a few trends to hit on that we've seen, again, in the last 5 to 10 years. I alluded to this earlier, but the idea that you have different ages of seniors and they have different needs and interests. And so really targeting that younger senior population, the 60 to 70 age group, we find that they typically were not involved or not participating in ways that we would have liked to have seen them more engaged. And so the senior centers are starting to respond to that, providing more active opportunities, more recreation spaces. The large gym that you saw at Falmouth, I think really speaks to that particular age group. And then on the other side, the other spectrum where you have the older population that might have a caretaker, we're seeing spaces, or we're designing spaces that address not just the patron, but also the patron support staff, whether that be a loved one, a daughter, a spouse. And so providing areas of support for them. May that be a breakout area, a cafe area where they can take a break, waiting for their loved one to finish up a class, or a more robust, I don't like to use this term, but an adult daycare space within a building that serves those needs as well. We did that in Situate. We designed one of the program rooms that could be adapted in the future if they wanted to expand that particular part of their program. And then, as Joel was talking about as well, every room is a program room, taking advantage of those spaces, really making a robust kitchen that can be used for different applications, and the outdoor spaces. And I don't know if we have a photo of the Situate exterior, but in Situate, we gave this beautiful 1,000+ square foot patio with a trellis and just ample space to really take advantage of the exterior and the outdoors. And related to what Joel was saying about COVID, is the benefit of that is right now, Situate's gearing to reopen. Right now, it's the staff only in the center. But the first spaces they're going to use and make accessible to their patrons are going to be those outdoor spaces. And so it just worked out perfectly. They were opening now when the weather's warmer, and they have this fantastic patio and bocce court that their patrons can start to use, and they can do things safely again.
Great. Thank you. Terry?
Wow, I have to say a great presentation, a lot of great information as to how you, especially with COVID situation and your forethought. And saying that before COVID, we did do a survey with our elder population as to their needs and their programmatic needs as what they saw for the senior center. And it came very clear that more space was needed. And the irony here, of course, it was before COVID, but even more now too, how important outdoors is. And the Rachel, what you just described, gosh, just can we plop it right here, right now? In saying that, you know, and saying that also the senior population here also sees that need of open space in order to meet the programs that we have, just because there's not enough space to have several programs going on at the same time. How do you see to be able to implement that? I know you've mentioned that quite a few times in different ways, but with a direct question, do you see anything more that you're missing that could be good to share with us about that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Joel. I think that one thing that's really important in designing and working with you is making sure that we really help you understand the space that we are proposing. Oftentimes we'll do 3D animations where you're walking through the building. That's something we can discuss doing as a feasibility study, but that helps you really understand the space in a way that just looking at a plan or looking at a rendering doesn't quite capture. And that feedback from you virtually walking through that space and saying, okay, I get it. I would be doing my program here and I'm missing the cabinets that I need in order to, to do X, Y, and Z program, or, oh, I can't really see into this one room that I want to be able to have a visual connection to make sure that everyone's doing okay. Can we open up this wall and make it more glassy? Those are the conversations that I think really help you understand your space and get the space that you want and need. And I'll say, related to that, we've done so many centers that right now we have relationships with, whether they're open or not, you could go and visit and we could walk through them together and you could get a feel for, this is what we've done in the past, this is what you like, this is what you don't like. And that will really help, again, you create that space that's just what you want.
Thank you.
All right, last question, Jack.
Jack, you're muted.
What makes your firm different from all the others?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's a difficult question because Dan did share with us who the other architects were, and it's a great group. There's no shortage of good architects in Boston, and no shortage of our competitors. I think what makes us different is that on the one hand, we're very methodical. We want to get all that information to you in a very precise level treatment so that the folks in Wilmington respect what we've brought to the community, whether they're for or against the project. My job is to have the opponents say, I really think you did a good job. I don't like where the site is, but it's, you presented that information, and we've had that happen in many communities. So on the one hand, being very precise and unbiased. And then I think the other side of it is what Rachel's alluding to, is being very hands-on, understanding, learning from Terry what her program is, what her thoughts are, and taking that detailed information and turning it into an emotional, positive response to the project, and having really exciting spaces. And I think that, people really appreciate our spaces on the inside of the building as much as the outside. And that's really something that we're striving for, is people to love coming to the building and using the center. So those are sort of the yin and the yang, I think, is really helpful from what our firm brings to the table. I do think that we have a great success in getting these projects approved at town meeting, and that's I think, a distinguishing characteristic.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee members? If not, did you want to ask us anything, Joel, before we say goodnight?
Well, I know that we're at our time limit, and I don't want to keep you any longer. I don't have any, maybe Lance or Rachel have a question. I just, we appreciate the opportunity and the in-depth questions, and we'd love to work with you.
Great
Yeah,
presentation.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
All right,
Good night.
thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Nice
Good
meeting you all.
night.
Bye, Dan.
See you later, Joel.
Well, Dan, you were right, There are 4 different firms there, so yeah.
I'll tell you something. I'm not going to try to sway you. This is a town decision. I'll answer any question you ask, and I will answer it honestly.
Well, I'm going to call on you for something here. I mean, is there anything that you've sat through this with us, any kind of insight or something you can provide? Because I'm going to try and see if we can develop a ranking and maybe come up with something. And then I'm going to ask you to maybe review some of the references of the top ones we come out with. So before we go into that, what's your thought as the OPM?
Well, I think there's multiple things here. I think we're looking at 1, presentation style, and 2, project product. They're 2 separate things. I did Falmouth with Joel, and he's a very competent architectural firm. It's tough to sit through some of the meetings because he likes to drone a little bit. But I can tell you he designs a beautiful building, a lot of detail on the inside. And I'd say he listens to the client. With regard to Dietz and Company, we've done 3 with Dietz. All 3 are completely different. One is very cold and institutional. One is very warm, and one is kind of in the middle, but all 3 are perfect for the community's wants and needs at the time that they requested them. One of them had construction issues, and the architect stepped to the plate and took care of the issues. Didn't analyze the problem and accepted responsibility, which, as you know, George, is tough to do in this business. Catlin did my first senior center in Kingston, and I don't think there's a better programmer than John Catlin. I think he's one of the best, no question about it. My concern, obviously, is it's John Catlin, and this is going to be a 3-year process, and we got a ways to go between now and then. And I'm a little concerned that Longmeadow is 5 months over schedule when I built across the street in Ludlow, and we didn't lose a day. in the same pandemic. So I don't know, you know, the rumors fly back and forth across that river, across the Chicopee River, as to, you know, why. So, so I think you get pluses and minuses on all of them. I don't think Kalo's probably going to be a good fit for the town. I don't think he connected with anyone on the committee, reading all of you, but he designs a good building too. So I don't think you can pick a bad firm here. I really think it's going to boil down to what you guys are looking for. I think I think we have to think about site selection, and I think we have to think about the quality of their construction documents. And I think you could tell the differences as you. I don't need to tell you. One firm didn't show any architectural drawings. One firm showed architectural drawings. One firm showed site drawings, and one firm showed a lot of nice pictures. So I think there's a way we can get there, but you guys have to kind of tell me which direction you want to go. I honestly don't believe there's a bad answer to this question. You can't make you cannot make a mistake here.
Okay. Any committee members, do you want to ask anything before we try to do discussion on ranking?
Well, I have a question.
Sure.
I totally appreciate what you're saying, Dan, but how do we know about the construction side of it? So we've met with these 4 companies, and for me, it's down to just 2, eliminated 2 already. But out of those 2, how would I know what their construction performance is?
So it varies by project and project size. It's not as simple as one does a bad job. It's not quite like that. It varies. I guess the question I'd have to ask you is, what 2 do you think? What 2 rise to the top?
Well, right now, I like Dietz and BH&A.
Okay.
I very much liked Caitlin's presentation. Very much. I was really impressed with their passion for what they're doing. But I just think that there's more meat on the bones with Dietz and BH&A.
The percentage of change orders on Ludlow that is related to the architect missing things is less than 1%.
Which firm was that, Dan?
Less than 1%.
Which firm?
That was Dietz. Similar in Falmouth, less than 1%. That doesn't mean we had less than 1% change orders. We had, I think, 3% in one and 3% in the other. But as both of them had indicated, that when the budget comes in a little bit under, sometimes you rethink some of the directions you're going in, and you do change things and add things back in. I never imagined that both Falmouth and Ludlow, I didn't sleep the night before the bids. I was that worried about the costs coming in higher than the appropriation. And I never did like that. And both of those I did. And both of them came in right where they were supposed to come in. Actually, one was a little bit under and one was a little bit more under, but they came in where they should have been.
Okay. Right.
George, I have a question for Dan too.
Go ahead.
I'm following along the lines of what Teresa, spoke to you about. I would agree that Caitlin, he is terrific at programming, and you can tell just by talking to him. But my concern is he didn't come in with anybody else, and we only saw Tom, and
John.
there was no John. I'm sorry, John, and there, that that gives me a little concern, where's the rest of your team? And if something happens to you and you've got these other projects going on and the length of it and everything. So that, I didn't get that feeling with Dietz. I felt that Dietz really did their homework, and even though they gave us examples of layouts, none of the layouts really appealed to me, but I appreciated, no, I'll be honest with you, but I appreciated them taking the 4 sites there and giving an idea of what the possibilities are. So, but more importantly, what you just said really kind of, really hits home. And that is that their design work, one less than 1% is a pretty good number when you're dealing with an architect.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of work for the team too. It's not just the architect. Don't think that the OPM and the owner didn't scrutinize all the way through to make sure that didn't happen. We'll be doing the same here. I don't care who we pick. We'll have similar numbers. We'll probably end up with 3% in changes overall, but probably be 1% will be errors and omissions. I think they both. I think the error and omission question was answered wonderfully by both Kalo and by Bogman, and that is, we live in a litigious world, and they sometimes sue you, and when they sue you, you get dragged in, and neither one of them were evidently found guilty, but to them, it's they had their head down when they're talking to us about it, and it's not really something that sometimes their fault.
And we got Dan.
Huh?
Yeah.
And we got you, Dan, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, I've had that happen to us where somebody sued an architect and we got dragged in.
Yeah.
It happens. We didn't settle either, and we didn't get found guilty. But I think that you have to separate this out as to 2 things. One, we have to work with them for 3 years. It's a marriage without the possibility of a divorce or a separation. The one thing, I'd love to work with John Catlin again. I have to be honest with you. I love his designs, but he didn't answer the question that the chairman asked, and that was, what happens if you go away? And he brushed it off and said, I'm only 74 and I've got more years than me. And that's true, but it doesn't mean he's not going to step in front of a T-bus and get clocked. That kind of not having that kind of a backup plan, I think, was important. And I think he needs to have a backup plan when he's doing an interview with a municipality, knowing that a municipal project sometimes can take up to 5 years. This one's not going to, but sometimes they do.
Can I ask another question as to something a little bit different with it? So the 2 firms that architect that Teresa was mentioning, now, how have you seen them relating also to the public, like keeping us educated, and how well are they presenting?
On both of those projects, they were fully funded when we were hired. So I can't answer how they would relate in that situation. But obviously they got funded, so they must have related pretty well. Falmouth is a representative town meeting, not an open town meeting. There's a big difference. I don't know. Are you guys open or representative?
Open.
Open. Big difference between open and representative town meeting. Greenfield and Westfield are city councils. The presentations went fine, but they're done to subcommittees, not full, and the subcommittee reports to the council. So I can't tell you how they did in a town meeting.
Okay.
George, if you want to continue down this road, I'm happy to give my feedback. For me, it's clear.
Yeah. Before we start throwing them out, I was just putting out there for discussion first, and then I'll ask Andrew to put the to put the spreadsheet up. So when we're done with discussion, I just don't want to throw everybody's choices out there first until we're clear on our discussions. That way, if anybody had any questions or was going either way, or might hear something, I was letting the OPM kind of answer some questions for that.
Well,
So,
George, I'll just leave it at this. For me, I have two good choices. I think I could go either way. I'd be comfortable. So I look for the ranking.
Great. If you guys are ready for it, I'll ask Andrew to put up the matrix there for us.
Okay.
And since Teresa already gave hers, you want to start that one off, Teresa?
Yes, so my first choice would be Dietz. And my second choice would be BH&A. And I would not select the remaining two.
Okay. Diane?
Well, believe it or not, I have a very similar feeling as Teresa. My first choice is Dietz, and my second one is BH&A.
Yeah, since I'm next, I would have to agree with you. My first one is Dietz. BH&A was second. Third was Caitlin, and Kayla was my last.
Yeah.
Jack?
Yeah, I'm going with Dietz and John Caitlin.
Okay. Greg?
I was really torn on this. One thing I'm sure of, I have two tied for first and two tied for last, but
That's okay.
you know, I was really impressed with John Catlin last night, like I'm sure most of you were walking out of him. I learned more about detail to senior centers in 1 hour than things I had never even. You know, given some of the discussion here tonight, the feedback from Dan, I think it's pretty clear that I thought overall the best presentation was from Dietz. They were very cohesive, very impressive. I'd have to put them number one. I'd put John a very close second, BH&A at third, and Kalo at number 4 if I had to choose.
Yeah. Paul?
Exact same thing as Greg. 3, 4, 2, 1 right down the line.
Perfect.
I loved John Catlin's passion, and I love his perspective. But yeah, that whole thing about what happens if you're not around is kind of.
It was tough. Yeah.
And most importantly, Terry.
So just like Greg, I'm like rather torn tonight, especially the last two. I mean, I was really gung-ho with Caitlin. Obviously, I can't talk about age because that's ageism for myself of talking about age.
Yeah.
You know, I have to really say BH&A, there was something about their presentation also. Dietz, I really liked, and I feel I'm really torn between both of them being number one. But with Dietz, spent a lot of their conversation talking about the town hall. And certain things that we hadn't even discussed. So I really think I'm going to go, God, I am torn. I think I'm going to go BH&A 1.
You love Caitlin. You love him.
Caitlin 2 and Dietz 3.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, I just want to make sure I'm clear on something. I can only speak for myself, but I think others too. It has nothing to do with John Catlin's age.
No.
I just want to make sure. I mean, thank you, Greg, for bringing that up because, you know, that discussion. I think we have to.
Yeah, for me, it was just that it was
A one-man shop.
One-man show,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly, exactly. I wish he had brought more people in to talk about some of the other things involved, and just got a little nervous with dealing with just him alone.
George pressed him on it. He didn't have a solid answer in terms of who would be the backup if he went on vacation, right?
Right.
Or anything. And so that made me a little nervous. I mean, if I was starting a architecture firm tomorrow, I'd probably hire him first, right? But in my mind, had a great team, and they seemed like they had a lot of resources at their fingertips.
Mhm.
I agree.
I agree.
And that's why when it gets down to it gets so difficult because, you know, just like you're saying, Caitlin, that the team effect. But though I have to say, those two today and their team, you could even tell team as they were talking back and forth. I just find this very difficult because I think Dan is right. They're except for Kalo. Those other ones, the other three are just I don't think we could go wrong. Really good.
I do want to make a note too, Greg. You're pretty observant. The Lexington project that he had showed us, he was the programmer, and another firm did the architectural drawings. And it would be nice if we could merge him with another firm, would have the perfect scenario for a senior center. But that's not what's presented before us.
Oh, you warned us, Dan, this would be tough, so.
It's four different ways to look at it. But I still contend that you could hire any of these four and you'll end up with a very successful project.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a couple comments?
Yeah, we'd like to hear your response, Jeff.
I was going to ask you, Jeff, towards the end, but go ahead.
You know, I would say that certainly that Caitlin, out of the gate, I was kind of blown away with just in terms of his knowledge about the environment that should be created for this age group and all of the subtle ways that you can design in features that will make the space safe but enjoyable, not institutional. One of the things that struck me about one of his comments that none of the other firms really spoke to, and it would have been almost tempting to ask the question, but he was very focused on this idea that you don't want these long hallways. And the other three firms, that didn't seem to be an issue with them. But clearly, one of the major concerns I had was when George posed the question about what happens if, for whatever reason, you're not available. I think that was certainly a concern. I thought that one of the strong features about Dietz was their understanding that you're not only designing for today in terms of space, but tomorrow, and wanting to create either have space on the site for future growth, or design it into the building itself. I thought that was a pretty important feature on their part, and the BHNA, I think I was most impressed with the Miss Young, her commentary. She seemed to be particularly attuned again to the distinctions that a senior center requires over, a conventional building. So, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I think Caitlin, as was noted here, if Mr. Caitlin could be perhaps the programmer in conjunction with one of these folks, that might be the best of all worlds. But I think either Dietz or BHNA would do well.
Thanks for your input, Jeff. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I picked when I went with Dietz because of the building for the future, the flexibility, the expandability. There was a lot there that they had a lot of foresight, which is really key in the construction. But not to take away from like BH&A when they were talking about airflow in individual spaces. So in today's pandemic,
Love
you're not
that.
contaminating the whole building, you're having separate areas. And then Caitlin, incorporating ambient light, outside light, natural light through light tubes and through wainscot. He was hiding the handrails and just, I mean, there was a lot that you had to pay attention to. And no, I think it was pretty tough of the three that we went through. But Dietz, in my mind, kind of stood out the most here. So that's kind of why I went that way.
Terry, the thing that stood out to me about BH&A is their success rate at town meeting. And remember that chart they showed with the towns in bold in which they were in charge of the location.
Mhm.
That was impressive.
Mhm. 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 I would agree. I would agree.
Okay. Well, do we have any more discussion on this, or would we like take a motion to?
Are these your final answers?
Yeah.
I'm torn. I love John Catlin. UV in the ductwork. I mean, this guy came out of the gate knowing that we had two projects competing, like right out of the gate, and it took everybody else, almost everybody else, us, to ask them a question about another project for them to acknowledge that. He had it all together. Tough decision.
Mhm. So who do we have here in total right now? We're looking then at Dietz.
At Dietz.
This is the top. Yeah.
So the next step,
BH&A.
should this be the motion and voted, would be for Jeff and I to try to work out the contract and get that done. If we don't come to terms on the contract, which does occur, it's not common, but it does occur, we have the opportunity to go to the second, which is BH&A.
Yeah.
But the only thing that's giving me pause, and forgive me if I'm talking too much here, but I'm looking at the chart. We all have similar thoughts, but I like a lot of you put a lot of weight into what Terry thinks, because Terry, you're living this every day, and I'm, I want to make sure that you're comfortable,
Right.
and so I know it's a tough choice, and I really value your opinion, and I think we all do.
Yeah.
So I just.
No, I have to say it. I just it's a very, very difficult. I can see me being. I think it's also important. I'd share this with Dan. These people are going to be with us all the time. We're going to be working with them all the time. So I do feel comfortable, I have to say, with any of them, except for that one that's the 4. I just think that BH&A just stood out a little bit because for me, due to the fact of the outside, that some things that they put the thought in, especially with COVID, it seems like they got a lot of what certain things that have been happening, and they were able to pivot, which not can these days. But Dietz, they also seem to have a good teamwork. Also, when talking to my peer who has been working with them, she said a lot of positive things. She said an awful lot of positive things of working with them. So I think if this is the majority, I really don't have a problem with it.
I'd like to just say too that the information we gathered from all 4 applicants, there's no reason why we cannot ask for some of the things we found attractive in another firm to have that included in the design
Good point. Good
by
point.
another designer.
Right.
So if we liked the skylight type of thing, which I've always thought that was a great idea, that is something that we could say to Deeds, you know, can you look into this? You know, can you make sure that you're separating these rooms? And we've gotten more of an education on how to build a senior center in the last 2 nights. I think that we can, you know, now at least we can speak to some of the issues with some kind of authority. But I don't think they're all self-contained. I think we can take some of the things we liked and the outdoor spaces. I thought, yeah, anything you do outside is going to benefit this senior center. And so, you know, that should be a big push anyway.
George, I wonder.
I appreciate that. I appreciate for you to be asking that. So thank you very much.
Yep. George, I would like to just throw in one more thing.
Hold on, Diane. Hold on. Greg had jumped in before.
Okay.
I'll yield to Diane, please. I'll go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead,
okay.
Diane.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, Terry spoke of the work that's been going on continuously here with sending out information and regarding programming and what people would like to see and everything. Maybe I was the only one that wrote pickleball courts down. I don't know. But anyway, we did get you know, she got a lot of information from that. But I do think that there was also a group that was formed right from the get-go that we went to see about 5 senior centers. And we started this in the fall, and it was enlightening to see them, hear about some of the issues of the operation of them, and we even one of the women that came actually you know, made up a sheet, the square footage and so on and so forth. But the most important one was the last one that we had seen, and Dietz talked to that, and that was having a building that could be expanded and added on in some point in the future. And the last one we had seen had done that. And they had the foresight to think that maybe they may be adding on at some future point. So that kind of really nailed me to Dietz.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to go back to Dan. He gave us some great insight before we did the ranking. And now that we've got our top 2 based on the ranking of Dietz and BH&A, Dan, I know, having been a former selectman, you've been put on the hot seat before.
You're going to stab me, Greg. I can feel it.
I'd be remiss if I didn't remind. We're paying you good money, man.
I'll make a minimum wage. And with the minimum wage going up, I'm going to have to go see Hull for an adjustment. So, couple things. I honestly don't think you can go bad with any of them, and I mean that, all 4 of them. I mean that sincerely. I think you guys gravitated to Dietz because the presentation flowed a lot better on their presentation than BH&A. BH&A's presentation was choppy, and his presentation style is different than Kerry's and Marco's. And I think that came across in how you felt about them. From a design standpoint, they're 2 different designers. And we'll get to determine what we want our building to look like and feel like and touch. And with all of them, I think Terry is being kind when she says she talked to her peer, because I'm sure her peer told her some things that aren't perfect about their experience too, because I haven't had a director that had a perfect experience. The one that takes the biggest brunt on this project is Terry. She's going to be exhausted when we're done. She's going to do most of the work. When furniture comes, we're all done. We're happy. The building's going up. She's working on furniture and fixtures and things on the inside. She doesn't get a break all the way to the end. But I think, Greg, I think that I think you made a good choice with Dietz, and I think you could have made a good choice with BH&A. And I think if Catlin had three or four on his staff, we would have a great choice with Catlin.
Yeah, Dan, I just, the whole time, I'm glad you mentioned that about the presentation style. Each one of these interviews, I couldn't help but think of visualizing them at a Wilmington town meeting.
Yes, yes.
What would be the reaction from folks?
Right.
And I felt like very confident that voters in Wilmington would be impressed by John, no question. And I thought for sure folks in Wilmington would be impressed by at least one of the people we heard from Dietz, because there were more than one that I thought was. So that was kind of what was running through my mind.
And that's in some towns that's almost as important as the design, because they know they don't get a building if it doesn't pass town meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know how Wilmington works politically. You guys might feel as though this is going to pass and doesn't need that extra push and love, but well, I guess it does.
Till it's over.
So, I mean, community outreach is going to be big. And I think if we're doing community outreach, you know, I've seen Joel do a lot of public presentations, and he does a nice public presentation. I've seen Carrie do a public presentation. She does a nice presentation. But town meetings are a little bit different. You have to shift on the fly. A question comes at you, you have to act confident. You have to be able to shift on the fly, gain the confidence of the voters. And I'd have to say, based on the four that we had tonight, you made the right choice on that particular matter.
And I have to say, going along with Greg also, Dan, that is one of my concerns.
Okay.
So that's why I originally asked that question, is I think that is a key. A big key.
Gotcha.
I'd like to just make my last comment on this. I think that when you say that Dietz had a smoother presentation, there's certainly no denying that. But then I was thinking, well, wow, did I buy into the superficial presentation? But I'm looking back now on my notes, and I'm thinking that presentation is actually key, because we have a very big problem here. And that problem is that it's very likely that the town hall site will be recommended for the senior center. And if that should happen, we have a big uphill battle, because that means that we're going to have to replace town hall. And that might not be currently a popular project in people's minds. So I think that if we have a presentation that will be able to smooth over some of those edges and carry us through that process, if it should come to that site being the chosen site. And then I also wanted to look back and realize that they were the ones that recommended increasing the size of the senior center and alerting us to that right away. And I think that's really key. And also, as Diane mentioned, future growth onto the physical building is also key. I'm wondering, I think it was maybe BHA that mentioned the Veterans Center, and would that at some point want to be connected to the senior center? I mean, that's conceivable. And I think that's a really good idea. A lot of those veterans may be seniors, and maybe that's a good fit. Maybe we're not going to talk about it right now, but opening up the door to saying we need room for reasons that we don't really know yet, but we need to be able to grow physically.
So I think
they did provide a lot more than you know, the obviously well-polished presentation. It was a lot easier to listen to their presentation than Shanae. I thought that was a little bit difficult to get through.
Well, BH&A had more information in their presentation than Deeds did.
Right.
With regard to process and steps in process. I think the question of the site is something that we're going to attack right out of the gate, because we need direction from Greg, from your board. We're going to need direction from the board as to what they are expecting us as a permanent building committee / senior center building committee. What do they want us to bring back to them? Because we're going to study the 4 sites, and we're going to study the 4 sites with the town hall too. But the ultimate decision on land is the Board of Selectmen. So we can say we want to go to Route 62, and the Board of Selectmen can say, no, you're going to St. Thecla's or St. Mary's, I forget, St. Teresa's, whatever it is, the next to the parish.
St. Dorothy's.
So, and we'll smile and get it built. But that's a chief executive decision, and that's what, that's the way it is. So if we can get guidance from them up front, I think it would be helpful for us to start doing that community circling around the wagons by getting a direction from the selectmen on really where the charge is going. And maybe you already have that and I don't know it yet from a political standpoint, but I think we need to know our boundaries.
Well, we have the Rubik's Cube. I'm happy to pass it over to you.
I can never get that 3rd row, Greg.
Well, can I just say one last thing? I have watched the selectmen's meetings when Greg gives his turn to talk about what goes on at these meetings, and he makes an excellent presentation, and he does it in a report form. And there'll be no doubt in anyone's mind on that board about which way we are going. But as far as the final decision, I think really it's this committee that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Town Manager, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but this committee, that's doing all the legwork of the pros and cons and everything that we're doing to make the recommendation. Hopefully, we need to have both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen behind us on this. 100%.
Yeah, certainly, the cost associated with either of these projects, it's without having the Finance Committee on board is going to be problematic, and clearly the Board of Selectmen, because ultimately assigning the site is going to fall under their purview. So, yeah, I mean, certainly the more we have consensus amongst the leadership of the board, the town, the better. We don't want to have a situation where the Finance Committee is in, one position, the Board of Selectmen are in another position, or I'm taking another position. I think we need to have, consensus, because residents are going to, I suspect, if there's some major divide, it's going to make it much more difficult for them to gain confidence around the proposal.
Correct.
I would just add that obviously the elephant in the room is that there are competing interests from many of the folks in leadership and just residents at large. And that I think that, a process like this will help because it's been so transparent that we'll have a good architect, no question, that we have a good OPM, clearly. And so, and I really like the idea of, breaking this up and meeting with the community, whether it's virtually or in person, hopefully, or a mixture of both, so that you can start to build support, because we're at a crossroads, and certainly I'd be lying to you if I didn't think it was going to be contentious. It will be. But I think a process like this, very deliberate, benefit a project like this.
One of the things that struck me, and I suspect it could be done equally with Dietz, and maybe it just happened to be that Joel touched upon it in his closing remarks, but his commentary about, really focusing on the data and, commenting, and I presume he was being, accurate and forthcoming about essentially putting the information out there, and even though dissenters saying to him, I didn't necessarily agree in the end with the site, but the information you provided was compelling. I think it's going to be important, whoever is making the case, that the data has to be as tight as possible. But then again, providing the data is only one thing. You got to make the pitch, because without being able to come across as confident and well-spoken and knowledgeable, even if you've got the data, people, the presentation is just very important as well.
And being able to answer questions on the fly. It's open town meeting.
Right.
We're going to get questions that we haven't thought of yet, and we have to be ready for that when the time comes. I'll tell you what was interesting. One of the interesting things about one of the slides that Joel had provided, he showed that matrix of the 4 sites. The site that they picked came in second. We built on the site that came in second. We didn't get to go to the site that was picked first. The selectmen overruled the building committee. So there are political reasons for their decision, and of course it passed the town meeting. So the selectmen were correct, not to say it might not have if it was at the other site. So we have to rely on the wisdom of the selectmen on the political end of this. That's why I think it's important that we get a little bit of direction as we're coming out of the gate, and we check in often with the selectmen as we're going through the process.
And I think it also really comes down to the price tag too. I think there is obviously a lot of uncertainty coming out of the pandemic, and the world has changed a lot since the last time we met as a town meeting, and when we voted for certain things. And I think people are really concerned about what this is all going to cost. And I think that we saw some examples tonight. I know I made a joke about it, but relatively, this is a reasonably priced project.
Well, I also think, Greg, I think we, by the time we get to that point of estimates and pitching to town meeting, we're going to know what the American Rescue Plan is providing for capital, because there is capital in that big 2,000-page document for cities and towns to spend on capital investment. I don't know whether it's going to be water only or water and sewer only, or whether it's going to allow us to do, a senior center, because, you can make the argument that the current senior center doesn't meet air needs. So there's a whole bunch of things I think we'll be able to wrap around by the time we get there on the financial end. But we're a long way away from that. I mean, we've got to identify a site, and we've got to all focus on identifying a site once we have an architect on board.
Now, I can tell you right now, Dan, I know for a fact that I'll be watching, I know Diane will be watching those town hall OPM meetings, and if you give the same lines to them, you're going to get a talking to.
I'm going to tell, yeah, don't worry about Greg. We could run him over.
I've said enough.
Dan, I'm gonna.
I think that's a really good point that you're saying, how these meetings are going on at the same time for the town hall, and Dietz saying that they are also going for that project. So I think it is crucial that we are very attentive to what's going on for the town hall, because I think if that group also sees them as number one, then I think all of us need to be very attentive to one another. And as I think it was Dietz that was saying that we need to kind of open up the communication. So it is kind of a moving ground right now.
Oh, there's no question there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the two groups. No question about it.
Okay, well, we've had a lot of discussion on it. I think we've hatched a lot out here. We see what we have in front of us. Are we all comfortable? What's there? And would I entertain a motion to accept the results that we have?
I'll make a motion, George.
to accept the results.
Diane, you're making a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Jack Holloway. All right, I'll take a roll call vote on that. Terry Marciello,
Yes.
George Hooper, yes. Jack Holloway,
Yes.
Diane Allen,
Yes.
Paul Malorani,
Yes.
Teresa Manganelli,
Yes.
Greg Bendel.
Yes.
All right, that's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
would you like me to contact all four firms as well as send letters like we did with the other firms?
Good idea, Dan.
yes, please.
All right, and Mr. Hall, I will talk to you tomorrow about working out, starting to work on contract.
Will do.
Okay,
Good.
sounds good.
Good.
The next item on our agenda was to schedule a meeting. I'm going to hold off on that until we get further notice. Then I'll reach out. Andrew, do we have any members of the public?
We do not.
Okay, so no public comment. Other than that, I'd entertain a motion if there's no more questions.
George, one last comment,
Go ahead.
okay? I feel very comfortable about tonight, but I want to leave on this note. We, the committee, you know, we didn't make a mistake picking Dan.
The building ain't open yet. We got a long way to go. I got a lot of mistakes to go, Diane.
I know we got a long road to go, but I truly feel that this committee, we didn't make a mistake picking Dan. And I really don't think we made a mistake picking Dietz. I really, really don't. I feel really comfortable tonight being able to say that. So
I think we were fortunate to have the firms we did. To Dan's point, we could have went either way.
You're really good at it.
And that's the 1 and 2 were right there. Those were my 1 and 2, and you know we had plenty of open conversation on it. So I think we did well, and I appreciate everybody's effort. I mean, there's a lot of work here, and
I'm gonna need the spreadsheet for the minutes.
Yeah,
And I'll put
Andrew will
together
forward that to
minutes.
me, and I'll make sure you get that, Dan.
Okay.
All right, and I do want to thank Andrew tonight. I know it's a lot for them. They just get to sit there and watch us. So hosting this meeting and being the wizard behind the curtain, you know. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. All right, anything else?
Happy Easter, everyone.
happy Easter. We have to make a motion to adjourn, right?
Motion to adjourn, and I'll take a roll call vote on that.
On to ham and gnocchis.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Teresa Manganelli, motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Paul Malorani as a
I'll arm
second.
wrestle you. I'll arm wrestle you, Diane.
No, take it, Paul. Take it, Paul.
Diane Allen?
Yes.
Yes. George Hooper? Yes. Greg Bendel?
Yes.
Terry Marciello?
Yes.
Paul Malorani?
Yes.
Jack Holloway?
Yes.
Teresa Manganelli?
Yes.
All right.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night, everybody.
Good night. Happy
Easter,
Easter.
everyone.
Happy Easter.
Take care.